Hello everyone, welcome to What If Hollow Knight Left the Dream Realm and Came to Modern Human World movie. Before we start, please go support Hollow Knight 84 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender. After defeating Radiance, Knight, currently known as the Shade Lord, has been trapped in the Dream Realm. With a great desire to see everyone again and not wanting to be there much longer, she remembers something an old acquaintance told her. Seer, you know, we never knew how to decipher the mysteries of the dream sting, at least not completely, he said, looking at a small vessel. Seer, according to my ancestors, this tool was used by our ancestors, who had the ability to alternate between realities with this object. But we never knew how to use it, explained. The vessel looked at her, interested in knowing how to use the power. Seer, oh little one, I'm sorry, we never knew how to use it. But our ancestors said you should just put your dreams aside and focus on reality to use it. After that memory, the X-vessel begins to try to decipher that enigma, which with some difficulty she manages to decipher. Once he knew how to use the power, which took him a while to understand, he used it, but since he didn't know how to use it correctly, it ended up absorbing a large part of his power and sent him to another world which was not Hallownest. Prologue. Our protagonist was at the top of the place named Home of the Gods, which looked out over the infinite nothingness of the place with an empty view. I haven't felt that way in a long time. I didn't know how much had happened, but I knew it was a lot. It was boring and monotonous to be in that place. But it wasn't so bad since at least I had company. Good Seeker, and my lord, said a nervous Seeker. And speaking of which, curiously, he turned to the Seeker, seeing her face to face, causing her to start to tremble a little. He tilted his head. He never understood why they were so afraid of him. Did he do something bad to them? The funny thing about this is that they weren't afraid of him because he had done something bad to them. They feared him because he was a giant shadow with 2 pairs of 4 eyes, which had 4 arms, and which gave off an intimidating aura. Ignore Radiance. And they also feared him because of how they treated him before he technically became a god. It turns out that before becoming the Lord of the Shadows, the God-Seekers treated him as someone inferior who had the insolence to challenge someone superior to him. A simple insect that does not enjoy the divinity that his superiors exude had the foolishness to challenge them. Those were the initial thoughts of those Seekers, which changed when they saw what that being had become. God-Seeker, pardon our insolence. Kneels. The deity became even more confused. Why did he apologize to him? As far as he remembers, nothing was done to him that could have made him angry. With signs he gave clues to the Seeker who did not understand why he was apologizing to him. Seeker, we regret the way we treated you when we met you. We are very sorry and understand if you want to destroy us, she said on the verge of tears. He was impressed by this and denied. Seeker, what? And he doesn't want to destroy us. After those words, the God of Shadows began to make empty letters in the air. My objectives were clear from the beginning. My duty was never to destroy, but rather to protect innocent people and eliminate a threat. I never really cared what anyone told me. I had a goal, and no one would change it. After the words disappeared, he continued writing. Without a mind to think or a will to break, that duty was instilled in me from birth, along with my brothers. I am not the one who destroys lives, I am the one who fixes them and exterminates the threats that threaten them. I am the real Hollow Knight. The Seeker read everything carefully, as if missing any detail of these words would cause something bad to happen to her. I don't hold any grudges or hatred toward you or your sisters. In fact, I am grateful to you for welcoming me with open arms to your place of worship. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Her eyes widened under her mask after reading that, and she started to cry, this time from happiness. Seeker, thank you for your words, my lord. From now on we will be better hosts for you, he said, kneeling. The Lord of Shadows was saddened by this action, so he lifted the little Seeker with one of his hands and placed her in front of him. Seeker, what happened, my lord? I did something you didn't like, she said, scared. He denied and wrote, I don't like people kneeling before me. I know what it's like to be in a similar situation. And I don't want to be like my father. Seeker, and who was your father? Of course I can ask, my lord. With a bit of hatred and resentment in his eyes, he wrote the words of that being that he repudiates for what he did to him and his brothers. The Pale King. The Seeker was surprised. Her god, the one who considered himself a god among gods, was the son of one of the greatest deities, a deity whom she and her sisters had worshipped in ancient times. The WRM, God Seeker, a god of gods, being the son of another god of gods. The Seeker said those words in an excited manner, but she changed when she saw her lord's expression because of those words. God Seeker, I'm sorry if I said something I shouldn't have, forgive me, she said sadly and upset, and so the ex-vessel had to calm the Seeker again. A few minutes later the God Seeker left the place, leaving only the Lord of Shadows. He stared into space again, until he remembered something. The creature pulled something out from within its body, revealing a somewhat worn, dreamcatcher-like handle. This object was what was known as the Dream Sting, an object that gave its wielder the ability to enter the minds and dreams of anyone who wasn't mentally strong enough to do otherwise. I look at the object with a bit of nostalgia. It stopped working once he was trapped here, and it was one of the reasons why he can't return to what he once considered his home, Hallownest. Your home. Despite everything, he missed them all: Elder Bug, Quirrell, little Grimchild. He accidentally dropped the Grimchild amulet when he entered the home of the gods again. Sly, his teachers Oro, Maddo and Shio, Cornifer, Iselda, Mila, his brothers in the Abyss, and Hornet. Hornet is the daughter of the beast Hera and the Pale King, her father. This would make them half-siblings. They didn't have the best of relationships at first, as Hornet tried to kill him on more than one occasion due to her fear that he would break the seals on the three dreamers. But over time, Hornet began to understand and comprehend why he was there. After Hornet understood that, she didn't exchange many words with him, but despite that, it was noticeable in those few words that her perception of him and his brothers had changed. I look at the object. He wishes he could use it again to see his friends again, even if it's just one last time. It's funny, before I couldn't even feel anything I did, yet I did it because I felt deep down that it was the right thing to do. I put my thoughts aside and looked at that worn tool. It was clear at first glance that time had not been its best friend. I tried to use it to activate it, but as always, it just failed, showing very little brightness when used. He looked sad once, even if it was just one last time. I would like to see your friends again. She would have been even more lost in her thoughts if it weren't for the memory of an old acquaintance. Literally. Flashback. We see a little knight, who was sitting face to face with an old moth who was meditating. The moth opened one eye and spoke. Seer, I always wondered, how do you have the patience to put up with my silence? Little vessel remained silent after all. She couldn't speak. Seer, oops, maybe it's because you can't talk, sorry dear. He tilted his head, not understanding why she was apologizing. It was the truth after all, wasn't it? Besides, he was already used to the harsh, cold silence of his hometown, and also the silence he felt after being alone on the outskirts of Hallownest. Seer, leaving all this aside, can I tell you a fact about my ancestors, about the Dream Sting? I asked curiously. He nodded. Seer, well, according to my ancestors, this tool was created by our ancestors, who had the ability to alternate between realities with it. But we never knew how to use it. Explained. I look at the vessel, interested in knowing how to use it. Seer, oh little one, I'm sorry, we never knew how to use it. But our ancestors said you should just put your dreams aside and focus on reality to use it. He became interested in that and looked at her, seeking her answer. Clairvoyant. I discovered what that meant a long time ago, but I won't tell you. In this life, you have to earn knowledge. Or in other words, you have to work hard to obtain something. He lost interest in it, and the moth laughed at that reaction. Seer, calm down little one, you'll understand in due time probably. The moth laughed at that, and the vessel tilted its head in reaction. End of flashback. I never managed to figure out what it meant as he focused on eliminating the Radiance infection. I look at that object again, starting to think. Leave dreams aside and focus on reality. It might sound a bit discouraging to some, as these words imply letting go of a dream and moving on with your reality so that you have a future. But there was something hidden in those words. Leaving dreams aside, if in this world, letting yourself be carried away by dreams was supposed to leave your conscience behind and be vulnerable to infection. Leaving all of these blank was the only way to avoid it. That is, I look at the artifact. According to what that moth said, this power that the Dream Sting had would help it alternate between realities. So that means it can also alternate between this reality and Hallownest. But I wasn't sure if it would work considering the condition of the object. But he decided to try. He closed his 4 pairs of eyes and concentrated on doing something he hadn't thought he would do of his own free will since he began to understand and feel emotions. Clear your mind. Little by little her mind began to turn completely dark, leaving nothing in it. The talisman began to shine as it usually did when he used it, but there was something different about that shine. The dream essence that should have been white began to shine along with the sting. Said glow was multicolored, and you could see how in some circles of essence shaped like dream catchers you could see stars, and it had the color of a beautiful starry sky. The Shade Lord felt his energy slowly drained away along with some of his power. It turns out that the dream sting, being so worn by time, caused it to drain energy and power when used so that it could function and use that power. But the excess energy radiating from his body made him become a little overloaded. Little by little, the intimidating image of the Shade Lord changed to a smaller one. It was seen as it shrank by itself until it was a completely black shadow with glowing white eyes. Suddenly, a bone-white mask was rebuilt in the shadow, causing its appearance to change. Once that happened, the same multicolored glow absorbed the apparently ex-god of gods, leaving no trace of him. The dream sting fell to the ground, as it stopped shining in that multicolored flash. In the distance, a God-seeker who saw everything was stupefied after seeing that. God-seeker too. I must tell my sisters. The seeker came down from the top of that place to inform her sisters of the event. But how can he get down from there if the top of that place is almost inaccessible to his species? Well, it turns out that all the God-seekers know that place like the back of their hand and know every corner of the place. That's all I'll say. Meanwhile, the little vase, who is our protagonist today, began to travel through a multicolored tunnel in which he saw different mirrors that showed different images. He didn't even recognize those images, not even some of the beings that appeared in them, but he couldn't continue concentrating on that because he felt like that strange tunnel was ending. A black-haired girl with Asian features was playing what looked like a Nintendo Switch, or well, a device identical to this console. The girl was lying on her stomach at the head of her bed. Come on, I'm about to move on to the next level," she said, typing like a lunatic. Unfortunately, a kind of white flash distracted her from her game, causing her to lose in the process. Lightning, stupid storm, snorts annoyed. I look out the window seeing a huge storm raging outside, and, between the darkness of the night and the rain, he managed to notice a somewhat dark and small figure in front of his house, which was lying on the sidewalk, as they call it in his country. Worried, the brunette hurriedly left her room, heading for the exit. Her parents hadn't arrived yet, so they couldn't take care of that. Before going out, he put on a swamp green raincoat and went out. A strong wind hit her, making her shiver with cold, but she didn't care. In a hurry, he reached the silhouette and took it in his arms, quickly entering his house. Once inside, I leave the raincoat hanging without letting it dry anywhere because I was in a hurry. I enter his room and leave the small figure on his bed, not without first putting a towel underneath. The black-haired woman was surprised after noticing something about the person she saved. "What are you?" she said, shocked. "Chat with the ghost of Hallownest." The black-haired girl stared in surprise at the being her eyes saw. In front of her was a creature with a navy blue cloak, a completely black body, and a white mask that looked like it was made of bone. This creature carried on its back what looked like a needle, as if it were some kind of very small sword. Sad face. Who know what is he? Wait. Is it even a he or she? Were the girl's thoughts. Sad face's mask, his way of dressing are totally out of the ordinary. What could he really be? He looks like a character from a video game. I continue thinking. Without noticing, little Vasija had already woken up and was staring analytically at the girl in front of her. The small container remained thoughtful, just like the girl. He had never seen an insect like her. Could it be a new species? The little gentleman took a step and became unsteady because he didn't realize he was stepping on something soft, so he fell off the bed with a loud thud onto the floor. The girl became excited when she heard the noise coming out of her thoughts. I look at the small figure on the ground and worried about whatever had happened to him. I approach and pick him up as if he were a stuffed animal. "Hey, are you okay?" she said worriedly. The vessel nodded, to which the black-haired woman sighed. I put it on the floor and Night looked around the room. It didn't look like Dirtmouth or City of Tears or even the Kingdom of Dreams. Where was it? I look out the window seeing how a huge storm was hitting the place, and because of the darkness of the night I could hardly see anything. The girl looked at the being who stared at the window, with a little difficulty because it was somewhat high. "Wait, hi. The little ghost had finally realized that he was smaller than he should be. I look at his hands, noticing that they were two small, dark-colored hands that looked like needles. I stare at them a little stupefied. He didn't mind being that size again. In fact, he didn't dislike it since he missed it a bit. But that doesn't mean he didn't like it when he was bigger and more intimidating. The girl finally came out of her surprise a little and began to speak. Hi little one, hee. And my name is Marcy, she said a little nervously. She was still surprised and also nervous, which is no wonder. After all, she was dealing with an unknown entity whose origins are even more unknown. And if we add this to the fact that she doesn't usually socialize much, we have this reaction as a result. The vessel looked at her a little intrigued, making the girl even more nervous. Marcy, and you don't talk much, right? The vessel tilted its head. Minutes later the girl understood something. Marcy, oh, you can't talk. Sorry, she said, embarrassed. Knight still doesn't understand why they apologize when they remind him he can't speak. Isn't that a lie? The girl quickly got up and took down her backpack. From it I took books, notebooks, among them a notebook decorated with images of video games and other fantasy things, among which a game called Chronicles of Vagabondia stood out. The cover of said notebook said, Marcy's Diary. Once he took all that out of his backpack trying to find something, he finally found it. A notebook that didn't look decorated, at least not much, and only had sketchbook written on it across the cover in slightly worn permanent marker. That notebook didn't seem to be used much. He approached the vessel, but not before turning to her and giving her the notebook. The small container looked at the notebook confused and also gave the same look to the girl in front of him. A look that he didn't capture because nothing could be seen through her mask. Marcy, you can write whatever you want on it so I can understand you. She didn't know how to interpret the vessel's silence like her other friends did, so it was understandable that she asked him to write about it. Now that you notice, it looks a bit like Bretta's diary. Since little details, he opened the notebook and began to see different drawings, most of them done in a way that was unknown to him. These drawings were illustrated with an anime theme which were not so well drawn but were passable. He continued turning pages, seeing different types of drawings, among them a somewhat peculiar music box. The box was one with golden frog details and 3 colored stones in the part where it opened. He downplayed it. I turned pages until I reached a blank one. The girl, for her part, noticed that the vessel had nothing to write with. Marcy, oops, sorry I forgot that dash. The girl was interrupted when she noticed the creature from who knows where take out a pen and begin to write. Marcy, oh, I see you didn't need a pencil, haha. Laughs embarrassed. The vessel handed the notebook to the girl, showing a language the girl did not know. Marcy, I can't understand. Wait. If I can't understand your language, how is it that you can understand me? The answer to the girl's question was easier than it seemed. Vessels don't need to learn languages, as they communicate differently than insects, and over time, they absorb everything they hear and see, making it a part of their being. The vessel turned page after page until she reached the end of the notebook. Once I reached the end of the notebook, I looked at the writing in the girl's language. His empty gaze began to analyze all the words, and little by little he began to understand the language in which they were written. He was finally able to read the words. I don't know why I'm writing here if I have a diary, but I remembered that today wasn't a very nice day and I didn't feel like taking my diary out of the drawer, he read. I woke up like any other day, but my parents weren't there like they usually are. After reading that, he felt sorry. Despite not having had the best father figure, his mother, the White Queen, was different after all. He continued reading. I arrived at school, and because I'm usually clumsy, I accidentally stepped on something and fell. Everyone laughed at me and I was embarrassed. And was there and helped me get up, a little worried about my fall and what I could have done to myself. She's a great friend, despite everything. Marcy, everything okay? The girl asked. I look at her, as she quickly goes back to the page she was on. He nodded. After doing that action, he prepared to take the pen and begin to write, this time in the girl's language. What kind of insect are you? That was the question written in the notebook, which had very nice, although somewhat sloppy, handwriting. The girl was confused by that. Marcy's species? Insect? What are you talking about? I'm human, she said /asked confused. Knight also looked confused. Human? He'd never heard of that species. What's a human? He made his confusion known. Marcy pointed at herself with her thumb. The vessel understood, so he nodded. They both heard a loud flash of lightning which made them a little excited. Knight reflexively took out his stinger, but not before leaving the notebook somewhere and putting away his pen. Marcy, hey, watch out for that. You'll take someone's eye out. She scolded, a little upset. The little creature looked around, searching for the place where the noise had come from. The girl sighed. Marcy, it's just a flash of lightning. It happens during a storm. Calm down. The vessel, still a little hesitant, put away his weapon. Marcy, by the way, what's that on your back? Sure, if you don't mind me asking. I ask. Knight proceeded to take the notebook which he left on the bed and returning to the page he had written before. It's a stinger, a common weapon that insects use to defend themselves. That was his answer. Marcy, wow, okay, all this sounds like something out of a video game. Something curious, hee hee. Can you tell me what you really are? I looked at her for a moment in silence and nodded, starting to write again. The girl looked at him carefully, noticing that this little being gave off a feeling of melancholy, sadness, and an aura of emptiness, as if it were made of that feeling. The notebook was placed in front of her face, which made her a little excited. Marcy, don't do that so suddenly, ha ha ha, you scared me. The vessel nodded. The girl paid attention to what was written in the notebook. I am a vessel. It was the written response. The girl looked at the container somewhat confused. Marcy, that's strange. We use those kinds of objects to hold flowers or carry water, she said, intrigued. The vessel seemed a little disturbed by that fact. They were interrupted after hearing the front door open and close hurriedly. Mr. Wu, Marcy, daughter, we're here, said her father's voice. The girl became upset and quickly locked the door. He turned to Knight. Marcy, they're my parents, hide somewhere. The vessel nodded and looked for a place to hide. Mrs. Wu, Marcy, are you okay, dear? Who are you talking to? Marcy, W with no one, ma. It's just that I got distracted and lost the game. How funny, that's what happened before they arrived. Marcy looked at Little Ghost to find somewhere to hide. Knight looked at the closet and hid in it. Once she did, Marcy sighed and opened the door, unlocking it. The door opened and he saw his parents, who seemed to be a little wet. Mr. Wu, how are you, daughter? The girl smiled. Marcy, hi Dad, Mom. I wave at them. He gave them each a kiss on the cheek. They noticed Marcy's bed. Mr. Wu, did you take a shower, Marcy? I ask with a raised eyebrow. Marcy usually takes a shower when she goes to school and after she gets home from school. Marcy, yes, it's that WL. Mrs. Wu, don't bother her. Scolding. Mr. Wu, it was a joke, my dear, he said sadly. The girl laughed. Marcy, WL, give me a moment, I have to organize my things for tomorrow. They both nodded. Mrs. Wu, I'll make dinner, she said, smiling. The girl just said yes, and they both left the room. Sigh. Marcy, why you can come out now, you never told me your name. The little boy came out of his hiding place and approached while writing something in his notebook. I have no name. The girl was surprised and felt sorry after reading that. Marcy, why your parents never gave you one? Was her question. With a bit of resentment he wrote. My father discarded me and my brothers like garbage. I have no kind of affection for him, either for him nor for his entire entourage. Only for my mother, wrote. The young woman's gaze turned sad, but she looked at him excitedly. Marcy, then I can give you a name, she said, smiling. The vessel looked at her and nodded. She remained thoughtful. Marcy, could you give me an idea for one? I don't have any good ideas, she asked, a little embarrassed. The little boy nodded and wrote. When my sister met me, she called me Little Ghost. After reading that, she remained thoughtful, until something occurred to her. Marcy, I know what about ghost. It means ghost in my language. I know it's not very clever and it's something simple, but I like it. The girl smiled at what was written. I'll just summarize that for the next few minutes they both spent talking and chatting, telling each other anecdotes, things they had been through, and about their lives. Marcy hugged the vessel at certain moments during the conversation, because she was adorable, and also because she told him part of her story and about Hallownest. He felt sad about that information but decided to put it aside and listen to more of that peculiar story. Even though the vessel didn't speak, the girl felt something she only felt when she was with her friends. She felt accompanied. Her parents almost never had time for her, and when they did, work things started to bother her, causing her to gradually feel alone in her own home. Obviously, she had company from her friends at school, but they would occasionally run away and leave her alone. With this being, it was the first time she didn't feel alone in her house, After reading his story in her notebook, she became a little sad. But after cheering up and continuing the conversation, she got bored, and so did he. She excitedly showed him her video games, and the vessel just watched them with interest and curiosity. The girl watched the game closely while playing the vase. That was until the difficulty increased, and in a moment of carelessness the girl lost. "Marcy, damn, I can never get past that part," she said, a little frustrated. The girl, a little annoyed, looked at her watch and noticed it was 8:59 p.m. "Marcy, wow, time flies when you're having fun." Then I look at the calendar, noticing that tomorrow was Friday. "Marcy, tomorrow is Anne's 12th birthday and I don't know what to give her yet." Thought. He looked at the little ghost and saw that he was drawing something on a piece of old parchment. "Marcy, MMH, hey friend, what is that?" He came closer and Ghost showed him what he was doing. "Marcy, wow." In front of her was a detailed image of her room which looked like it had been hand-drawn. "Marcy, you draw well." He nodded, turning the map towards him and taking something out. The little ghost pulled out a kind of compass from who knows where again. After taking out that peculiar compass, he turned the map with his left hand and held the compass in his right. The girl was surprised to see how the image of the individual's mask appeared on the map, which had the same color as the one seen in person. Said mask was seen with a white aura around it. "Marcy, how did you do that?" she said excitedly. The vase wrote in the notebook. "Magic!" The girl grimaced in annoyance, and the vessel just seemed to laugh at her reaction. Before saying anything, I hear his mother's voice. "Mrs. Wu, Marcy, honey, dinner's ready." Raising her voice from the dining room. "Marcy, I'm coming, Ma," answered. He turned to Ghost. "Marcy, I'll be right back, wait here." He nodded. The girl went to the door of her room and left. Once he left, the vessel put away the compass and his map and then climbed into the Taiwanese woman's bed. He approached the window. He saw that the storm continued, but he looked at a specific place. In that direction he felt something familiar. I felt emptiness in that place. Meanwhile, in a dark alley wet with rain, a dark puddle began to form. From this puddle emerged shadows with white eyes and horns of different shapes and sizes. Whispers could be heard from those beings which were a little incomprehensible, but some of them could be heard. "He is here, we sensed it, son of the god in the void, the true Hollow Knight, brother." A school day with Ghost. The vessel stopped looking at the window and simply sat on the bed. I should be surprised to feel the presence of the void, but it turns out that the substance he and his brothers were made of was much more than previously thought. Many things are unknown about that dark liquid, but when he became the Lord of Shadows, he managed to understand everything about her. One of them is that it followed whoever owned it wherever they went, and it surprised them that it also did so outside of its dimension. Wait, does that mean his brothers will follow him too? It was probably his brothers who were the presences he felt. He became excited when he felt another of those lightning bolts strike from the sky. He turned around and looked at what it was. A whitish ray that went in a half-zigzag shape struck a distant place. He was worried about how dangerous and threatening that thing was. Too bad Marcy didn't explain to him that lightning only hits a higher than normal target, or also a conductor of electricity. I watched the rain fall furiously. The sound of the drops hitting the roof of that house was calming in some way. He stopped looking at them and got out of bed, looking for the girl's notebook. Once he found it, he returned to the place where he had read about the girl's bad day. I continue reading. "After that embarrassing fall, I went in with Anne, but not before Sasha made fun of it a little. One day, because of that clumsiness, you're going to kick the bucket, Mars," were her words while she laughed. Ghost felt annoyed reading that, but continued. "During class everything was boring as always. I started playing on my console because I hadn't woken up feeling like it, but the teacher called me out. She asked me a question about the topic being discussed in class. Because I was in my own head, I answered incorrectly, and she took my game away from me and revoked it for the rest of the class. When I finished, the teacher gave me back my game with a reprimand. Pay more attention next class, Miss Wu. You are the best in the class, and what you did today is very surprising." Those were her words. I just nodded at him without saying anything. I said it as if I had committed the worst crime of my life. I mean, it's serious since I was disrespecting her, but still. I didn't feel like being connected to the real world today. There are times when I fake a smile, mostly to keep others from worrying about me unnecessarily. I've always felt like something was missing in my life. I guess missing my parents at home was a big one. The vase stopped reading as she heard someone coming towards the room. Since he wasn't going to have time to hide in the closet, he decided to hide under the bed. Once he did, he noticed someone enter the room. The presence began to search the closet. "Marcy, ghosts, where are you?" she said, upset, looking for the little one in the closet. The vessel came out from under the bed, approached the girl, and pulled at her pajama pants to get her attention. The girl was excited by the creature's touch. "Marcy, oh, here you are, ghost. I was scared. I thought you had left here, ha ha ha," she said, relieved. The vessel just nodded sadly. The girl yawned and headed to her bed, not before turning off the light. She wrapped herself in it and looked at the little ghost who was watching her intently in the darkness. "Marcy, do you want to sleep with me?" I asked. The little boy took out a lamp with a kind of firefly and lit it so he could write. "Ghost. Can I?" was the question written by him. "Marcy, that's why I'm asking you," she said, smiling. The vessel nodded and lay down next to the girl. "Marcy, rest," she said, slowly closing her eyes. The girl, as soon as she closed her eyelids, fell into Morphos's arms. It took the vessel a few minutes to fall asleep because he was still a little thoughtful about what this place is. Ghost slowly began to fall asleep. Marcy dreamily hugged the small container like a stuffed animal, and it simply accepted the hug, leaving an adorable image. The next day, an annoying and incessant sound began to be heard, which woke Marcy up. The Taiwanese woman opened her eyes with laziness and tiredness. She reached out to turn off the alarm clock and rubbed one of her eyes with her hand. The girl felt like she was hugging something. "Marcy, MMH?" He looked at what he was hugging and was surprised. "Marcy!" She stopped hugging Ghost and stood up from her bed, surprised. "Marcy, I thought all this was a dream." Thought surprised. "I really thought it was a dream. After everything that happened to me last night, it was definitely something totally unreal." Little Vasija soon woke up as he felt the girl stop hugging him. He sat down and then looked at her. Ghost stood up and looked for his notebook. "Ghost. Hello, did you sleep well?" Wrote in notebook. The black-haired girl shook her head and read that before nodding. "Marcy, as seriously it wasn't a dream," mumbled. The vessel tilted its head. "Marcy, and it's nothing, friend. I looked at the alarm clock and noticed that it was 7 a.m. Sigh. Marcy, I have to change." The girl headed to her closet and began to take out the outfit she needed to go to class. Once he did, he turned to Ghost. "Marcy, hey, can you come out? I want to change my clothes," requested. The knight nodded and headed for the exit. Upon arriving, I tried to reach the knob with little jumps. These doors are not as accessible as the ones in your world. "Marcy, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot how small you are," she apologized embarrassedly. The girl opened the door for the gentleman, and he proceeded to leave the room. Once outside, the little ghost began to explore the house. He went to the main room, the kitchen, the bathroom, but there was one room he didn't go into because something told him not to. That room was Marcy's parents' room. He headed to the main room and began to look curiously at everything that was there. He saw the television and the remote control in the living room and looked at them with curiosity. He had not seen similar things in his world. "I take the remote control." Ghost looked curiously at the buttons on the object in his hands and out of curiosity pressed the red button. Suddenly he became excited when he heard the loud sound of the television. "I hear a voice. All slugs are useful, even the damaged ones." These words were spoken on television by a black-haired boy, dressed in a white, black, and orange shirt with an orange star with an S on the left side of his chest. The boy saw a kind of creature with dark green on some parts of its body and pale green on the rest of it. The little ghost was curious at the mention of that slimy and somewhat unpleasant insect from his world. After all, that species had caused the inhabitants of his native kingdom a few problems. The vase watched with curiosity that show that was on television and remained entertained until it ended. After a few minutes I turned off the TV as I was hearing Marcy's footsteps. "Marcy, I'm ready now that I realize. Are you going to stay here? Or are you going to find a way to get back to your world?" I asked. The vessel forgot that he had told Marcy that he came from another world. Ghost took out his pen and notebook and began to write. "Ghost, the only way to return to my world is to have in my possession the object that brought me here. So until I find an alternative way to return, I'll have to stay here." After writing that, the girl looked a little excited about it. "Marcy, if you want, you can stay with me, just until you find a way back, of course," proposed. The vessel thought about it for a bit. He had nowhere to go, and he had no information about this world, not to mention that this girl had been very good to him. I looked at her and nodded. The girl got excited. Marcy, great! Exclaimed I. Gee, great, I'm glad you accepted. That way you won't have to stay on the streets, she said, smiling. The girl headed for the door, and before she got there, Ghost stood in front of her. Marcy, what's up, Ghost? I asked, confused. The little ghost wrote, Ghost, you can take me with you. I don't want to be alone. The girl was moved by that request. Marcy, the problem with that is that if someone sees you, it could be very bad for you. I don't know if I can take you. Besides, how would I take you? Ghost, I can go in your backpack. The girl looked at the mentioned object and then opened it. There wasn't much in the backpack, and there was almost nothing to carry, because today was Friday and they were leaving earlier than usual. Marcy opened her backpack and placed it in front of Ghost. He got in and the girl closed her backpack. Marcy left her house after locking the door with a key she put in one of the pockets of her backpack. Once he did it, he walked to the bus stop because his house was a little far from the school. During the journey, he continued playing on his Nintendo Switch. Once he arrived, he got off the bus while still playing on his Switch, and because he wasn't paying attention to where he was stepping, he fell down the uneven steps. Marcy, wow! He closed his eyes expecting to fall, but he didn't feel anything. She opened her eyes, noticing how she was being recomposed by something. I look at her back and notice a kind of black tentacle which reassembled her and put it in her backpack. He put away his game, and getting off the bus he looked around and at the passengers. I noticed some were shocked by what happened and others were busy looking at their phones. Marcy, Ghost, was that you? He took off his backpack and looked inside it. Inside it, a completely black space was seen, and then white eyes opened within it. The girl was half excited and scared by this, but calmed down when she noticed how a notebook came out of that darkness held by the same tentacle that helped her, which said, Ghost. Yes, it was me. I sigh in relief. Marcy, wait, what happened to you? The darkness reformed, taking on the vessel's former form. Ghost. My kind is capable of transforming into a shadow. Unfortunately, we have no control over it when we die. Marcy, I understand. Stop. When we die. I look at Ghost in surprise. Ghost. I'll explain it to you later, answered. The girl nodded, still intrigued by those words. He continued on his way until he reached the entrance of his school and saw a chestnut in it. He became upset because he remembered something. Marcy, oh no, I didn't remember Anne's gift, she said, upset. The little ghost poked his head out of his backpack for a moment to look at Anne for a few moments, and then went back inside. From the notebook Marcy gave him, he tore off a page and began to draw. A few moments later he finished doing it, and gave Marcy a drawing. Marcy, what is dash? He was surprised to see in that drawing a detailed image of Anne smiling while saying, Happy birthday, Anne. Below, he was surprised to see how the drawing of the girl was very well detailed and really looked like a photo. Of course, if it weren't for the fact that the drawing was in black and white. He approached the brunette with the drawing in his hand and touched her shoulder. And oh, hi Mars, said with a smile. The black-haired girl returned the greeting with a smile. Marcy, hello, and a banana. The chestnut noticed the drawing in the Taiwanese woman's hands. And what's that, Marcy? She asked, intrigued. Marcy handed her the drawing, showing it to Anne, surprising her. And this cute, did you draw it? I asked excitedly. Marcy, why yes. Do you like it? She answered nervously. He didn't like lying, especially because he was taking credit for something that wasn't his, but it was better to lie. And yes, I like it. I love it. Smiling exclaims, it's a great gift, haha. Marcy smiled. Wow, Mars, you did a great job. A blonde girl spoke who had just arrived, looking at the drawing with a smile. And Marcy, hi Sasha. Both said, smiling. Ghost got a little annoyed after hearing the name. I remember reading about the one mentioned by both girls in Marcy's notebook and was a little bothered by their words. Because of the discomfort he felt, he didn't notice that he began to release void which was coming out of Marcy's backpack. And Marcy, is your Switch having that problem again? She said, upset. She glanced at her backpack and got upset. She took it out and, turning her back on her friends, opened it, seeing Ghost giving off a black aura. Marcy, Ghost. The vessel came out of its thoughts and stopped emanating void. And Ghost? Wait, what's in your backpack? The brunette asked. She became excited when she noticed that the brunette had stood in front of her, worrying her because she was looking at the backpack. Marcy, and it's nothing. It's just a stuffed animal, she said, putting away her backpack. The chestnut was surprised by this, And, why would you want to bring a stuffed animal to Mars school? And besides, what kind of stuffed animal gives off black smoke? The brunette became even more nervous about this, looking for a believable excuse to tell her friends. Sasha, of course, and not to mention why it seems to be alive. Said sarcastically, okay, now I was screwed. Control over the void. Because your powers were mostly drained, you need to reawaken them. Fortunately, you can still control the void because you still have that power. Vacuum generation. You can generate this substance whenever you want. Shadow form. You have control over your shadow form and will not need the stinger to defend yourself because your void tendrils act as a weapon. Void pools. You can generate small or large pools of this substance that will act as traps that will only react if it detects that it is not its master or a vessel. Vengeful spirit. A spirit-shaped projectile that will cause damage to the enemy it hits. Desolate leap. You will give a strong stomp that will cause area damage. Howling specters. A cloak of souls that will cover you and deal damage to any enemies around you. Soul reserve. For each enemy you hit, you will convert those hits into fuel for your spells. Pure sting. A weapon that once seemed on the verge of breaking, returned to its former glory by a great blacksmith. Dream stinger. Given to her by the last surviving member of the Moth tribe, this weapon has the ability to alternate between the realm of dreams and other realities. Moth cloak. You can propel yourself with this cloak and thus dodge enemy attacks more easily. This cloak was imbued with void, giving you the ability to phase through any person or enemy. Monarch wings. 2 white wings that you can use to fly. In the game, they give you the ability to perform a double jump. But here I will change that because it will make more sense what they do. Crystal heart. This item was used for work in the mines of the Crystal Summit. Currently, this is an object that will accumulate energy around you, revealing itself in the form of a pink crystal, and you will be shot out after accumulating a certain amount and releasing it. Isma's tear. This item gives you the ability to swim in acid. Over time you discovered that it also allows you to swim in boiling water. Amulet assimilation. Your body can absorb and assimilate the amulets you have acquired, giving you the ability to use as many as you want without causing an energy overload. Despite this, you will still be able to have the amulets physically. Includes the compass because it is also an amulet in the game. Maps and a pen. Maps and a pen given by 2 great friends that you wish to see again someday. These maps have helped you on your journey. It's a shame they're no longer useful because you're not in your own world. King's Mark. There will be some doors in this new world that will require special access. This mark has that access. After death. After dying you will wake up in the last place you rested. And after returning to the place where you died there will be a shadow waiting for you which when touched will give you all the items you lost after your death. Indestructible consciousness. There is nothing after your death. As long as the void exists, you will continue to exist. Lamellula's lantern. Lantern bought from a stingy and somewhat greedy insect. This lantern will illuminate even the darkest of paths. Invasive mind. You will be able to enter the minds of other people regardless of their resistance, gaining access to their memories and minds. Beta vessel creation. An incomplete and imperfect creation of a vessel. It's a simple puppet that you can use however you want, but over time it can acquire consciousness and feelings. Hunter's journal. A journal in which you can record data and or information about your enemies. Someday you would like to be able to complete it and show it to whoever gave it to you. A School Day with Ghosts Part 2. Marcy, a little nervous, pulled herself together and she ran away from her friends like a soul from the devil. What else could I do? He didn't want them to do anything to Ghost, especially because he considers him a great friend in the short time he's known him. I entered the school heading to my locker. I arrived and opened it, starting to put some things away and take out others. A photo fell from among them. She picked it up and saw that it was a photo of her with her friends that had the letters BFF on it. He was shocked to see in that photograph someone he didn't know. In the photo you could see her with her 2 friends and a white-haired girl with 2 colored eyes, one red and one green. The girl's clothing consisted of a black suit and shorts of the same color as the suit. She had a kind and sweet smile that made his heart beat for some reason. She shook her head blushing at that, so she put the photo in her backpack. Marcy gave the photo to the little ghost. Marcy, could you please save the photo? Begged. The ghost did as requested, but out of curiosity he also set out to see the image. Somehow the white-haired girl in her seemed familiar to him, but he decided to keep her at the Taiwanese woman's request. He inserted the photograph into a part of his body and it was consumed by him, disappearing. He has the ability to store certain objects in his body regardless of their size, something curious he discovered after becoming the Shade Lord. Marcy walked to an empty classroom in her school and entered it, closed the door, and after doing so she approached a wall and leaned against it. She was still uneasy after all when the bell rang and she had to go to class. Once recess started, her friends would hold her back to ask her about Ghost. He decided to put those thoughts out of his head and opened his backpack, taking Ghost out of it. The little ghost waved to her as she came out, a wave that she returned with a slight smile. Marcy, we'll have to confront my friends anyway. After all, they saw you. Resigned sigh. The little ghost remained thoughtful. He walked to the center of the room and sat down. Marcy, Ghost, what are you do dash? She was interrupted when she saw how the small ghost began to leave a medium-sized black puddle in the center. Marcy, Ghost, you're melting, she said, upset. She approached him worried about her friend but was relieved to see how the black liquid stopped oozing out of him, showing that nothing was happening to him. Sigh. He approached the puddle, avoiding touching it, and took little Vasija in his arms. Marcy, don't do that, you scared me. The ghost didn't seem to care and simply pointed at the puddle he had repeatedly left. The girl looked at the puddle, noticing how it slowly disappeared into the ground. Marcy, what did you do? Ghost took out his notebook and wrote with his pen. Ghost. A surprise tool that will help us later. Wrote. Marcy, where did you hear that? I asked, smiling. He wrote again. Ghost. I heard it from one of the bus passengers. Wrote. The girl laughed lightly at that. I put him on the floor and leaned back against the wall. He started playing on his switch again as Ghost headed to the window. The ghost saw how some fences, the grass, the window, and many other things were wet from yesterday's storm. His attention was diverted when he felt a silhouette pass in front of the window. I tried to find the presence that I saw with my hurried gaze, and I would have continued doing so if it weren't for the fact that a pair of white eyes appeared in front of it. The vessel jumped in fright, causing her to fall off the table and attracting Marcy's attention, who approached her worriedly. Marcy, Ghost, are you? Oh God, what is that? Screams, upset. I imagined the meme where Bob says, "What's that?" Haha, the black-haired girl took Ghost scared, moving him away from the window. In front of her was a shadow with two white glowing eyes and two horns, one bigger than the other, which began to spin enthusiastically in front of the window. The shadow suddenly moved through the window like a ghost and approached Marcy and grabbed Ghost. Marcy, let Geo dash. I was going to say, upset and ready to defend her friend, but he was surprised when the shadow embraced the vessel with enthusiasm and affection. Ghost reacted to the hug and reciprocated, looking equally excited. Minutes later the shadow put him down and stopped hugging him but remained attached to him. Ghost noticed Marcy, who was shocked. Marcy, Ghost, what is that? I asked a little nervously. The vessel took out the notebook and began to write in it. I turned the notebook over. Ghost. He's one of my brothers, he doesn't have a name yet. But they used to call him the broken vessel. I write in response. It turns out that all the vessels that died were reborn thanks to the void, and fortunately they did so with their memories intact. The black-haired girl looked at the shadow. Marcy, so, he's one of your brothers, right? Ghost nodded. Marcy, how many are there exactly? Ghost didn't know what to answer. He didn't know how many of his brothers there were either. He looked at his brother, who simply continued to refuse to leave him. When he noticed his brother's gaze, he separated. He started writing to her. Ghost. Do you know how many of us there are? He did not understand the question asked by his brother. The reason? They didn't know how to read the language. His brother began to look at the little ghost's letters in detail until after a few moments he stopped doing so as he was assimilating the letters to understand them. I looked at him and shook my head because I didn't know either. Ghost resigned himself and went back to writing and showed the notebook to Marcy. Ghost. We don't know. Marcy's eyes widened and she muttered. Marcy, I don't want to imagine what happened to your mother. Mutter. Both brothers were confused when they didn't listen and asked before. Bucking, ring ring ring, school bitch. Take two, sorry, ha ha ha, I wanted to do it. Ring ring ring. Ghost's brother became alarmed and grasped void tendrils ready to attack whatever that noise was. Marcy sighed. Marcy, Ghost, we have to go to class. The girl put her backpack on the floor and opened it. The little ghost made his way into the backpack. His brother followed him, getting into the backpack too. Marcy, hey, this isn't a TARDIS. Scolding while looking inside her backpack. He was surprised not to see the creature inside his backpack and became worried. Marcy, where is little one? She said, upset. Suddenly the shadow came out of his backpack. Looking at her closely, she sighed in relief. Marcy, what a relief! I thought something had happened to you. Do that again. I'm falling behind. The shadow nodded and went back into his backpack, camouflaging himself in it. The brunette left the empty salon and began walking through the halls of the establishment, arriving at her salon and entering. 4 orbs, 2 and 2 of different colors, landed on it. 2 of them were blue and the other 2 were hazel. Marcy was nervous about both looks, both from her friends. Sasha and Anne followed their friend with their eyes, making her a little nervous. Once she sat down, they felt like saying something, and before saying it, the teacher entered the classroom, relieving Marcy and thanking the person above her. The class started and she just decided to play on her switch, although she lost from time to time because she felt the brunette and blonde's gaze on her neck, and it was making her nervous. Teacher, oh yes, you must do a group project on the habits and behaviors of insects. He began assigning each student the insect theme that each project would cover, until it was Marcy's turn. Teacher, Miss Wu, you will be doing the project with young women Wei Bright and Buntry on orb-weaving spiders. Sasha and Anne got a chill at the mention of spiders, and Marcy looked excited and Ghost well. After hearing the species of the spider, he felt a little sad because he remembered someone. Marcy nodded and the doorbell rang. Most of her classmates shot out for recess, and the teacher hurriedly packed her things and left. Marcy got ready to leave a little nervous. Before she even set foot outside the classroom, she was grabbed and detained by her friends. Sasha, stop there, Marmar. We want to ask you something. Marcy, I thought they were going to escape, she said nervously. And we can't today, because the place we usually escape through is soaked, and the ground has turned to mud. The chestnut spoke. Sasha, so, how about you tell us what you're hiding in that backpack? She said, bringing her hand closer to the backpack. A black tendril grabbed the blonde's wrist, and she became excited and tried to break free. Sasha, what is this? She said, upset. Why can't I take my hand away? Marcy, Ghost. I look at the creature in his backpack, which was calmly drawing inside it while having the same lamp from the previous night being held by the tips of its feet acting as a support. The vessel looked at her, becoming upset when he noticed that a tendril was sticking out of the girl's backpack. Ghost hurriedly made a pool of void appear under the trio, and it absorbed them along with her. And Marcy, Sasha, Aya. They screamed in fear from the sudden fall. The earring holding Sasha's wrist missed and released her due to the sudden fall. The pool of emptiness disappeared, and a student who was passing by drinking Coca-Cola saw all of this. Shocked, I looked to where the girls had been. I looked at the can of liquid with disdain and shock, reading where it said Coke. He threw the soda in the trash still with the liquid and continued on his way, a little shaken and swearing never to drink that soda again. His friends were right about him. Meanwhile, in the empty room where the Taiwanese woman was, a puddle appeared, the same empty puddle that Ghost made before. The trio emerged from it, and finished screaming when they saw that they were in an empty room. And, this is another room. Young Wu took off her backpack, opening it, and taking the little ghost out of it, and holding it like a stuffed animal again. Marcy, Ghost. What was that supposed to be? I asked, upset. The little ghost of Hallownest took out the notebook, and turned the page until he stopped on one. He points with his needle-like hand at the words he had previously written. A surprise tool that will help us later, he said. I sighed, understanding what he meant. Marcy, yes, but it seems it didn't work as expected, she said, looking at her friends. The two looked at the little ghost in surprise. Marcy, C-dash, and Sasha, what is that? They interrupted in shock. Suddenly a black blur stood in front of Marcy as if to protect her. When the chestnut and the blonde saw the shadow, they fainted. Before they hit the ground, Ghost stretched out 2 void tendrils, preventing them both from falling and hitting the ground. Marcy sighed in relief. Now, when they wake up, what should I do? Things to explain and an old friend. Marcy sighed, leaning back and sitting against the wall from before. Ghost gently left his 2 unconscious friends on the wall, and he approached the black-haired girl with his brother. They looked at her. Marcy, what's wrong? Ghost wrote. Ghost. All good. The girl nodded when she looked at him, and the ghost of Hallownest put away the notebook and sat down next to her. The black-haired woman remained silent for a moment. Marcy, now what should I do? She asked with a sigh. The ghost's brother hugged her with his void arms, to which she became excited but reciprocated. Marcy, thanks friend, said with a slight smile. She looked at her friends, noticing that both of them were showing signs of awakening by exalting her. Marcy, oh no, she said nervously. They both opened their eyes and then looked at each other. Marcy started to shake nervously and got even more nervous when she saw how her friends were looking at her. Both of them opened their eyes even wider when they saw a kind of shadow flying next to Marcy with two white orbs where her eyes should be, which looked at them, tilting its head. They both just screamed. And Sasha, it wasn't a dream. Their screams echoed throughout the school. Fortunately, those who heard that cry only downplayed it, and some had heard. I'm sleepy. Because of that scream, Ghost, who was drawing, deviated from the line he was making, creating a somewhat curved and poorly made line. I look at the duo with slight annoyance, although it wasn't noticeable because of their masks. Marcy, while hearing that shout from her friends, covered her ears. Marcy, sometimes I wonder how and can speak as quietly as I do when we have to present and speak in front of the whole class, despite yelling like that. Grumble. They both looked at the two void beings while rubbing their eyes. And Marcy, can we talk to you? Marcy nodded a little nervously and looked at the vessel and her brother. Marcy, I'll talk to them at the other end of the room, so stay here. They both nodded as Ghost typed. Ghost, we have nowhere to go, and it would be very foolish of us to go out and show ourselves to your friends. Wrote. Marcy nodded and joined her friends. He looked at his brother and wrote. Ghost, can you tell me how you're here and if there's more to you? His brother nodded and Ghost gave him Marcy's notebook. While Ghost paid attention to her brother's information, Marcy walked to the other side of the room, and when she reached her friends, they sat on the floor under the blackboard. They both looked at her. Marcy, what do you want to know? He, and was the first to speak. And first of all, you did notice how we reacted, right? We acted very calm, didn't we? He nodded, surprised to find that he did. Marcy, wow, I thought that dash. And what the hell is going on here? She said, upset. Sasha, what are those things? Sasha speaks with her arms crossed. Marcy looked at her, as if she had said something offensive. Marcy, they are not things, they are living beings. At first she also said something similar since she was a little scared because Ghost and his species were something unknown to her. Sasha, okay, what are they? Emphasized the last word. He remained silent for a moment, unsure whether to tell them. Mainly because it's information he shouldn't share, as it's somewhat personal. Marcy, as they're kind of from another world. She didn't sound very convinced when she said that, but she tried to make it sound believable. Her friends were silent for a moment. Sasha, too many video games. Don't you think so, Marmar? She asked, looking at her friend in surprise. Marcy frowned. And, are you sure of your words, Sash? At least I believe him. Sasha hugged her with an arm around her neck with a smile. Sasha, I'm always right, she said with a look that said otherwise, and became nervous. And why yes, of course. A tendril grabbed Sasha and pulled her away from Anne, the vessel brother being responsible. Sasha, what hey? Let me go! The shadow slowly flew closer to Sasha as its gaze became more threatening than the girl's. The blonde began to hear whispers coming from the shadow which she could hear perfectly. You're just like him. I don't like you. Leave her alone. Who do you think you are, treating her like that? Those were the whispers I heard from that shadow. Sasha looked into the shadow's eyes, and he saw it. Everything he had suffered, how he had to repress his feelings so as not to be discarded like garbage, how he saw all his brothers fall little by little into an abyss from which there was no escape. He saw how his own father threw him into that same abyss as if he were nothing. Your controlling ways, I hate it. It reminds me of the one who used us for his own purposes and then discarded us like trash. Do you want to know what it feels like to be discarded, father? The last sentence didn't seem directed at her, but rather at someone else, but the shadow kept looking at her. Marcy, please let her go. The shadow reacted to the Taiwanese woman's plea and released the blonde. Sasha looked shocked, her eyes wide open and her gaze lost in shock. Somehow she understood what that was. After all, her father is almost never with her due to his divorce from her mother. And Sasha, you are dash. The brunette had approached the blonde to see if she was okay, but with a sudden movement, she recovered and moved away from Anne. The moment was interrupted when they heard thunderous footsteps outside the room. The trio turned around and through the classroom window they saw some students running towards the school exit. But that was the least of it as they saw what was causing the commotion. Outside the classroom they saw a giant silhouette which was apparently crawling to get through. The trio stepped back a little scared. The creature opened the classroom door, causing Ghost and his brother to stand in front of the trio protecting them. A mask similar to Ghost's was shown, but the peculiarity was that this one was bigger. Suddenly a dark mass began to enter through the classroom door. All those shadows started coming in like some kind of flock of crows. All that darkness began to surround Ghost, avoiding in the process colliding with the trio. His brother joined the vortex that formed in that room. Then that tornado of darkness stopped, revealing hundreds of shadows with white eyes and horns of different shapes and sizes. Those shadows gave their brother a group hug, which he responded to with some difficulty because there were so many shadows. Whispers were heard from those shadows. "We found it! We found you, brother!" Whispers were heard which sounded excited. A few minutes later all the shadows separated, seeing their brother, while some moved excitedly, surely celebrating having found their brother. Ghost turned to the giant figure outside the room and approached. Imagine him crouching down while he is in the hall of the living room and without the stinger. The creature's hand took him and hugged him with great affection and emotion. Ghost, a little suffocated due to the strength of the hug, responded with difficulty but almost fainted, something that the giant being noticed and released him with the concern of having hurt his brother. I let go of him and looked at him worriedly. Ghost, who had already recovered, looked sorry and gave him a sign that it didn't matter. He took out his notebook and wrote in the language of his world, "Ghost. Hello, big brother." The words written by the ghost of Hallownest shamed the pure vessel. His other brothers also called him that, which embarrassed him. Ghost wrote again, "Ghost. What are you doing here?" The ex-Hollow Knight signaled to his brother, which he understood as meaning they wanted to see him. Ghost. How many saw them? Although he was initially confused, he understood instantly, so he began to mentally count a few minutes. He then made a sign of confusion, implying that he did not remember the number of people who saw him and his brothers. Ghost stared at his brother for a few minutes before facepalming. The pure vessel seemed to remember something and taking something out from within his cloak gave it to him. The vessel became curious and was surprised to see a familiar amulet, Grimchild. The vessel looked at that amulet attentively and shocked. With excitement he absorbed the amulet, acquiring its permanent effects. Suddenly a silhouette covered in red fire appeared. It disappeared, revealing a silhouette the size of Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. A female figure was shown which looked like a bat with the difference that her eyes were completely red. She looked around and her attention fell on Ghost, and she approached him excitedly. "Dad!" Happy scream. She lunged at the little ghost, rubbing herself against him as she cried with happiness. Everyone present looked at the scene, although the three girls present looked shocked at the being. Ghost hugged him back, excited to see little Grimchild again. The body of the one who was her daughter in her dimension was more developed, looking more grown up. I put that fact aside as I was excited by the presence of his daughter. "Marcy, what's going on here?" The brunette interrupted, very confused. All the shadows, including Grimchild and Pure Vessel, were staring at her. All the shadows, when they saw her, began to surround her, looking excited and for some reason grateful. Some hugged her, causing her to get a little excited, but she put that aside when she realized it wasn't an attack, and one of the shadows gave her a white flower that looked delicate. The girl touched where the flower was, trying not to hurt it, and blushing with embarrassment. "Marcy, why are you giving me this?" "Apparently they know that someone helped Dad. I suppose it was you." The Bat Girl approached Marcy, stopping hugging Ghost, leaving him on the ground, and took her hands with a smile. "Thanks a lot for helping Dad, really, huh?" Marcy, thank you very much." She hugged her happily and gratefully. Marcy blushed because she had never been hugged like that, and didn't know how to react. "And okay, calm down, Anne. This must be a dream. A strange and very crazy dream. Maybe if pinch ouch and nope this is real," she said, upset. The little receptacle approached and, worried about the chestnut's reaction, and began to circle her with concern. "And yeah?" Ghost walked over and started writing. "Ghost. He's worried about the way you're acting. Please calm down," he asked, and looked a little embarrassed and began to inhale and exhale, calming her nerves. Once calmed down, she looked at the shadow that worried about her and approached. "And I am sorry to worry you, my friend," she said sadly. The shadow hugged her with emotion, and the brunette, although a little excited by the action, caressed the shadow, being surprised to notice that the touch with it was soft and a bit as if she were not touching anything. Sasha rolled her eyes and spoke angrily. "Sasha, listen, you do know that the whole school saw you, right? And it's just a matter of time before someone wants to study your anatomy." "I speak, interrupting the moment. Grimchild, who was hugging Ghost like a stuffed animal, looked at her annoyed. Grimchild, who's the party pooper? I asked. Sasha approached the bat menacingly. Sasha, who are you calling a killjoy? Batgirl, she said threateningly. Grimchild, you bleached blonde, he replied, already fed up with the girl. Before one could attack the other, and separated Sasha from Grimchild, and Ghost used a tendril to pull her daughter away from the blonde. Grimchild, huh? Dad, wait, I haven't punched that bleached blonde in the face yet. Sasha, let me go and I'll kill her. Marcy, could you please focus on the main problem? Interrupts aggressively and a little worried, and then Sasha looked at her in surprise at the way their friend was acting. Marcy, it's just that I am worried that they saw your ghost brothers, she said, embarrassed. Ghost looked at his brothers and took something out of his cloak. From his cloak he took out an amulet different from the others he had. This looked like a completely black mask with two bright white eyes similar to the shadows of his brothers. This was the amulet known as Heart of the Void. When his brothers saw the amulet, they understood what their brother wanted to do. Suddenly all the shadows present in the classroom began to be absorbed by the amulet except for the first shadow that found Ghost and Pure Vessel. Once they were absorbed, Ghost kept the amulet in his cloak. And why weren't you absorbed? I asked, looking at the receptacle. Grimchild, that's because he decided to stay with you, Marcy, and then looked at her in surprise. And how? Ghost wrote. Ghost. The amulet responds to the wishes of those who can be absorbed by it, so it is the decision of the one who is absorbed or not. They looked at Pure Vessel. Grimchild can only absorb beings made of void, cannot absorb beings composed of it but with a physical form. Answered before they asked. In shock they both nodded, and Marcy's sad face, I feel like this is going to become a habit. They thought in unison. Sasha, and now how do we hide the big guy, the bat, and your shadow friend Anne? I asked, looking at the aforementioned. And why are you asking me? Ghost, without saying anything, concentrated, and on the floor where the girls and Pure Vessel were, a pool of void appeared. Grimchild, attention. Order. Sasha, don't follow me, Chu-ah-h-h-h-h. She was interrupted when she was sucked into the puddle. The receptacle that was left floating in the puddle became excited when it noticed that it didn't go with them, and before the puddle disappeared it hurriedly got into it. In the backyard of the Wu house, a pool of void appeared from which the Calamity Trio, Pure Vessel, Grimchild, the Shadow, and of course, our protagonist emerged. Once they did, Sasha was the first to speak. Sasha, hey you dwarf, if you're going to do that, let me know next time, she said, annoyed. Grimchild, if you don't want me to burn your ass, don't talk to him like that. And you two stop fighting. Sasha looked at her. Sasha, why are you taking his side? And I'm not taking anyone's side, just stop fighting. Pure Vessel, already annoyed by the fight between his brother's daughter and the blonde girl, stomped his foot, making the ground rumble. Ghost, stop fighting already, wrote Sasha/Grimchild. She started it, they said, pointing at each other. Marcy, enough. Everyone looked at her. Marcy, we need to focus on the present, no matter who started this case. Let's go in. Headed to the backyard door, her friends, although a little surprised, followed her. Marcy opened the door and noticed Pure Vessel. Marcy, and you, how are you going to get in? The vessel simply concentrated as a white aura surrounded him, shrinking his figure. Marcy looked around, noticing that fortunately there was no one there. Pure Vessel, already shrunken, entered the preteen's house. Now they all headed to the Taiwanese woman's room. The black-haired girl saw everyone present, Pure Vessel standing in front of her bed, Ghost sitting on it, and the girl sitting on the floor on top of the carpet, and the receptacle was floating, watching her fixedly and obediently, while Grimchild was looking closely at the place, looking curious and excited about what was there. Marcy, well, if you don't mind, could you explain how you ended up here? Grimchild looked at her. Grimchild, of course, he. Pure Vessel raised his hand and asked Ghost for the notebook, which he gave to him. With the pen that Ghost gave him he wrote. Pure Vessel, I'll tell you everything, wrote Pure Vessel. Everything happened after Radiance's defeat. Flashback. I woke up chained in the black egg and surprised and confused. I freed myself from my bonds. I left what was once my prison, meeting someone outside. When he noticed my presence he became alarmed and grabbed his needle. What? You're supposed to be locked up, said defensively. I made signs that suggested I didn't mean any harm. Hey, The insect in front of me began to look at those plants of the forgotten crosses, which shone a bright orange. The curious thing is that these stopped doing this as they returned to their bright orange, changing to a dark and empty black. That insect looked surprised and looked at me. Why you don't have orange eyes anymore? I was surprised to hear his words, and they also made me realize that I had control over my actions. A puddle of water that formed due to leaks at these intersections reflected my mask, allowing me to notice the detail that my eyes were indeed no longer orange. Some time later, all of Hallownest began to regain its former glory, little by little. During that time I found an amulet in the garbage dump in Royal Canals, and when I equipped it I found Grimchild. The same insect I met outside the Black Egg introduced herself to me as Hornet, currently on her way to becoming the next ruler of the kingdom. We were walking together in the beautiful panorama of the green path, while I listened to his words alongside a Grimchild who admired how beautiful the panorama looked. Hornet, hey, you haven't heard from him, right? Says while looking straight ahead. Grimchild noticed me, attentive to my response. It is worth mentioning that during this time that she was with us she began to grow and develop. I shook my head, at which she sighed and the bat looked disheartened. Grimchild, Dad? Said sadly. Hornet, not knowing what to say to the girl, just continued. Hornet, I can tell you something. I nodded. Hornet, since the end of the infection happened and I'm on my way to becoming the next queen of Hallownest, I don't feel I have the right to claim the throne. Grimchild, what? Why? She said, upset. I was also surprised to hear those words. After all, when I met her I knew that her desire was to take command of her tribe. It must be equivalent to being sovereign of a kingdom as large as Hallownest. I look at both of us. Hornet, the former ruler of this kingdom, our father. He did morally unacceptable and horrible things, but at least something good came out of everything he did to your brothers. Even though her words bothered me and the girl too, she cleared her mind. Hornet, it's horrible what he did to to our brothers, but at least in the hands of Little Ghost this kingdom would be in better hands. Explained. He looked at us. Hornet, do you understand what I'm saying? In honor of my mother, I want to be the leader of my tribe. Not queen of this kingdom. That position should be held by him. Clarified. Although what the Pale King did to our brothers was horrible, at least there will be someone better than him to do it. I understood what he meant by that. I just nodded. Grimchild, I guess you're right, she said, sounding proud of her father. We walked while she told us anecdotes, and one thing or another, until we arrived at the Caminos station where that old means of transport was. Dear, oh, how nice to see the future ruler of Hallownest here again. Hornet looked away a little annoyed, something the deer noticed. Dear, oh, I'm sorry if I said something you didn't like, young lady. Hornet, oh, don't worry about that, it's just personal things. Dear, I understand, young lady. They would have continued talking, if there hadn't been a loud bang in the transport tunnel. Grimchild, what was that? I speak, upset. Dear, oh, an earthquake? I saw a black liquid begin to seep through a crack in the tunnel. By instinct and as if something was calling me, I ran to the tunnel and entered it. Hornet, brother, don't go! Worried scream. Grimchild, hey, wait for me. Followed me flying. She entered the tunnel with me, following my lead. Hornet worried about me and Grimchild wanted to follow us, but was interrupted when the tunnel was blocked by rocks which could have fallen on her if it weren't for the deer. Dear, be careful, young lady, you are too young to die in such a horrible way. Hornet, but them. Dear, they'll be fine. The tunnels are sturdy and stable. We just have to wait for them to get out before the structure becomes unstable. Hornet could only look worriedly at the place where her brother had gone with her other brother's adopted daughter, praying that they were okay. I started running in that tunnel with the girl until I reached the King's Station and exited, starting to follow the presence of the place. We went from the City of Tears to the Royal Canals and then to the place where that presence came from. We noticed a Ghost Seeker on the ground as void began to flow from her eyes. Good Seeker, and my lord, where are you going? He said deliriously. Suddenly a pool of void appeared below us which began to absorb me and Grimchild, who was unable to fly since it was something sudden. We appeared in a dark, trash-filled place while more puddles of the ones that absorbed us appeared, and our brothers emerged from them. When we saw each other I was moved, we hugged and felt happy to see each other again, and also we informed each other of what we knew. Days later we felt your presence, and we headed towards you, and on the way Grimchild asked me to remove his amulet, and thus give you a surprise. End of flashback. Pure vessel. That's the story of how we ended up here. Everyone looked at the vessel except for Grimchild and the vessel, who already knew that. Marcy, well, I guess I could find a way to make you guys stay here. And what? Of course not Marmar in any way. Marcy, but, Sasha. But nothing. Where would you hide the big guy and his shadow brother, apart from the strange bat? Grimchild, first of all, go to hell, bleached blonde. Second, there's no need for me to be present when we have to hide, after all. After saying that, he spun around while his body was surrounded by a red flame, turning into a small ball of fire that entered his amulet. Minutes later he came back out while bowing to them elegantly. Some applauded him for such a demonstration. Sasha, TSK, conceded. Grimchild, and fortunately it doesn't leave any sparks or flame residue. Hee. Laughs, ignoring the blonde's words. Suddenly a notification arrived on Marcy and then Sasha's phones. The notice stated that classes were suspended due to a problem with the school's water supply. Marcy, okay, am I the only one who finds this weird? And sighed. And I guess not. Do you think this has to do with your friend Marcy? She nodded. Marcy, I think it would be best to be discreet for now, especially you, she said, looking at Ghost and company. They nodded. Ghost already understood why he said it, but he felt a little offended. He decided to simply resign himself, and stood up. And okay, Mars, remember you and Sash are invited to my birthday party. So you know what that means. The three of them gathered together excitedly. And Sasha, Marcy, sleepover, they said. The three of them laughed excitedly as Ghost reunited with her siblings and daughter. Ghost, with them having fun, we'll be able to talk, get information, and catch up on what's been happening, he wrote, to which the three nodded. Marcy walked out of her room and spoke to Ghost. Marcy, Ghost, by the way, please watch the house for me. He just nodded. Marcy, thanks friend, you're a sweetheart. Ghost heard the door of the house being locked and just sat down to talk with his brothers and Grimchild. It was Ghost's turn to speak, recount and explain everything that happened, where they were and why they ended up there. His brothers and Grimchild, although surprised, agreed to support and be there for Ghost when he needed it. And so began a great and somewhat empty adventure to an amphibian kingdom that they had no idea existed. Where it all began. A year has passed since our protagonist, his brothers and his daughter arrived in the human world and met the Calamity Trio. A lot has happened, including the fact that the broken vessel has become a great friend of Anne's, who has been visiting Marcy from time to time, and Sasha, well, she was persuaded to try to bond with Ghost or one of his siblings. She only empathized a little with the little vessel. This is because at some point she knows what it feels like not to have your father when you need him most. But that will be for another occasion. Sasha gradually began to relate to the vessels, and although it was a little difficult at first, she began to see them in a more understanding way. The trio's relationship changed, and now Sasha is no longer so manipulative with her friend, although she is still the type of person with good intentions but poor execution, and became a little more responsible in a way, although not that much, and this because she had to worry a lot about the little receptacle showing itself. I didn't mention it, but the latter started staying with him because he used to follow her home with the intention of taking care of her, obviously avoiding being seen. And then Marcy scolded him many times for this, until and came up with the idea of having him stay with her. Marcy agreed, asking her to be careful, and she agreed. And regarding the brunette, well, this hasn't changed much. In fact, her moments at home are no longer so lonely, having Grimchild, Pure Vessel and Ghost with her. But currently she is afraid that one day they will return to their dimension and leave her alone. Although she knows she cannot force them to stay, she does not want them to leave. Oh yes, since what happened with the carelessness on the part of the elder vessel, the trio feels that they are being constantly watched, and so does Ghost, to which the latter decided to take action on the matter. During the night he sent some of his brothers to look for any signs of anything strange, pointing out the places where that feeling had been present. Ghost over time was developing again some of the abilities he had as God of Gods, or well, one of them. This was an ability called Hive Mind, which allowed him to pass information from himself, or from one vessel to another and vice versa, and of course, also see what they saw. I activate that ability by linking the brothers he sent to each other, and to him, so I can see the reason for the feeling. The little Ghost noticed small surveillance cameras placed somewhat discreetly in well-hidden places. Obviously she ordered all her siblings to destroy those cameras, knowing that someone was probably watching her friends because of her. Ghost still misses his home world to this day, but now feels he somehow has a responsibility to this new dimension. Currently, our protagonist is inside the backpack of a chestnut who was about to eat a cupcake that his mother had made him for his 13th birthday. That was until a redhead arrived with a backwards-facing cap, 2 braids, freckles, and a blue sweatshirt with a pink skirt. This girl was Maggie the bully? Or whatever she is, after all, she's not that important. Maggie, hi Babatree, what are you eating? A vomit bun, and looked at her with a smile, ignoring her provocation, but Ghost wasn't exactly happy about the redhead's arrival. And hi Maggie, and no, it's not a bun, it's a cow niobing. A traditional Thai dessert made from rice and coconut milk. Mom made it for me for my birthday. Maggie had a stupid face because she didn't understand what the brunette was saying, but she shook her head and still mockingly said, Maggie, oh happy birthday, hey, give me that. Suddenly he snatched the pastry out of her hands, which made an upset. And hey, please give me that back. Maggie, oh, what if not? She said mockingly. Suddenly, black tendrils came out of the brunette's backpack and grabbed the redhead. Maggie, what is this? She said scared. The atmosphere suddenly began to turn dark as incomprehensible whispers began to be heard. Maggie, what? I speak scared. One of the tendrils took the bun that the redhead had and gave it to the brunette who was in shock but took it. Suddenly the whole atmosphere of the place returned to normal as the tendrils disappeared and the redhead, still in shock and with her eyes wide open, looked at the brunette. Maggie, what's in your backpack? I speak upset and scared. And I don't know. She answered, still surprised. Damn, I'm still not used to that kind of thing. Damn Ghost. She cursed, although she was still grateful for her friend's actions. Sasha, and the blonde arrived, interrupting the moment, and the attention of the one named by her and Maggie was placed on Sasha. Sasha, oh hi Margot. I hadn't seen you. The redhead blushed at Sasha's arrival. Maggie, bright, why yes, sorry, I was just leaving, she said while leaving the place. Sasha watched her leave a little bored and turned to Anne. Sasha, did he do something to you? Do I have to hit someone today? She said, checking in. The river chestnut. And no Sash, I'm fine. Ghost interghost. He opened his backpack and saw Ghost who was doing something. And Ghost, I've told you 1,000 times that no, huh? What's that? In the Ghost's hands was a cupcake with slightly sloppy chocolate frosting and fudge on the topping that said, Happy birthday, Anne. Only it was slightly misspelled, and took it tenderly and Ghost wrote, Ghost. I didn't know how to write with icing, so that's why it turned out a little bad. By the way, my big brother helped me cook it since he's more experienced in the kitchen. The girl forgot what Ghost did a few minutes ago and gave him a hug. And thanks, Ghost. Ghost. Happy birthday, Anne. He saw the chestnut in front of him as the notebook was held by a tendril. Sasha, ahem. The brunette put Ghost in her backpack, closed it, and recomposed herself by turning to her friend. And sorry, Sash. The bell rang and Sasha frowned in annoyance. Sasha, tisk anyway, what do you say about getting out of here and having a great day for your birthday? And I don't know, Sash. It's just that Marcy has been a little down today. And I don't want her to be alone, like she almost always is. I look at her. Sasha, then come with us. And what? No. Marcy is the best in her class. It will be a direct violation on her record if she runs away with us. Sasha, is a boring school record more important? Or having a great birthday party, friend? She said, putting her arm around her friend's neck. The chestnut didn't know how to protest, so she sighed. And I okay. Sasha, cool, I win. You can't stop manipulating whoever you want, right? Bleached blonde. Sasha rolled her eyes at those words. Sasha, the crappy Batgirl had to come and ruin the fun. In a red flame appeared Grimchild, who looked at the blonde with disdain. Grimchild, whatever you say, peroxide. Oh, Annie. She approached the brunette and hugged her affectionately. Grimchild, happy birthday, darling, Happy laugh. The brunette smiled happily at the girl's greeting and hug, which she reciprocated. And hello, Grim. Thank you. Grimchild, oops, I forgot, lol. Grimchild found herself surrounded by a red flame, and her appearance changed to a more human one. Without the mask, imagine her with scarlet red eyes. Both of them were impressed when they saw her. And since when can you do that? Grimchild, since I started developing. Do you like it? She said, laughing happily. The brunette nodded and Grimchild smiled. Sasha, wow, you look better now. I look at her annoyed. Grimchild, whatever you say, silly. And by the way, we have to go get Mark Dash. Before finishing, a puddle appeared on the ground and Marcy emerged from it, ignoring everything around her while playing on her Nintendo. Marcy, yes, I won. Ha ha, take that, he wait a minute, where am I? And Sasha just realizes. They said with a poker face. Marcy, oh hi, and Sasha, and are you? Grimchild, MPH, Marmar? You're so mean, I live with you. Marcy, that voice, Grim, is that you? He just gave an elegant bow. Marcy, you look so human. She said surprised, hey, how did I get here? And looked at Ghost, who played dumb, making the brunette sigh. Sasha, that doesn't matter. How about we get out of here and go have some fun? Marcy, sure. She said excitedly, oh sorry, happy birthday and a banana, and smiled, thanking her friend. The trio set off for a walk away from the school, accompanied by Grimchild. Grimchild, they shouldn't be doing this, said seriously. Sasha looks at her bored, you are not our mother. Grimchild, I wasn't talking to you, bleached blonde, I was talking to Anne and Marcy. Both looked defiant. And stop fighting. Ghost. Even so, that doesn't mean and isn't right, wrote Ghost. And oh, come on, Ghost. I know it's not right. But it's for my birthday, please, buddy. Do it for me, yeah? Begging with puppy dog eyes, Ghost just resigned himself. Ghost. It's okay. And yes, thank you, you're the best, she said gratefully to her friend. Grimchild, Dad, don't take their side. Aren't you worried they might do it again, or worse, that someone might hurt them? I ask in disbelief, Ghost wrote. Ghost. Yes, it worries me, but not so much if I know that I'm with them to prevent it, replied. I'm going to summarize everything they did. They stole a shopping cart. They graffitied their names in an alley, although Marcy was just playing on her Nintendo while Anne and Sasha did so. They went to a garbage dump and started knocking down cans with rocks. Marcy couldn't hit any of them. Marcy, damn. Sasha, ha, look and learn, Mars. I throw the stone at a can which knocks it over. And cheer up, Marmar. The chestnut threw a stone which knocked down another can. Marcy was a little discouraged at not being able to guess. Grimchild approached. Grimchild, allow me, Marmar. The girl stepped aside and Grimchild picked up a stone. He spat fire at it, causing it to engulf in red flames and surprising Marcy. The now human bat threw the pebble at the can Marcy tried to knock over, and it exploded into red flames when the projectile hit it. Anne and Sasha were shocked by this as they watched the can melt as it was consumed by the flames. Grimchild, top that oxygenated, said mockingly. Sasha developed a vein on her forehead but was calmed by Anne. Now we are standing in front of an antique shop, and I am not sure about this. Sasha, come on, Anne, just get in, grab the box and leave, it's simple. I tried to convince her. Grimchild, no, interrupted. They turned to her. Grimchild, we let them have fun and escape from school. They dragged Marcy into their mischief, being the best of the class. I won't let you force Anne to become something she's not. Sasha saw her bored. Sasha, it wouldn't be a crime. Anyway, it's just a clumsy old thing that no one is going to buy. And the old lady doesn't even pay attention to who enters and leaves her store. I look at her threateningly. Grimchild, it doesn't matter if it's a crime or not. You're forcing your own best friend to steal. It doesn't matter if it's a big or small crime. A crime is a crime no matter how you look at it, said slowly. The tension in the air could have been cut with a knife. But both were interrupted when they heard the bell on the store door. They both turned around, seeing the brunette entering. Grimchild looked at Sasha disapprovingly. Sasha, what? He came in on his own. The bat looked at her, frowning. Grimchild, you are the worst friend anyone could have, way bright. They both remained silent, one angry with the other, while Marcy watched the brunette enter the store with interest. With Anne, the brunette walked unsteadily towards that music box. He took it, and after doing so, a notebook was placed in front of him by a black tendril. Ghost. I can buy it for you, you don't need to steal it, wrote. The chestnut looked uncertain. And but what if Sasha stops being my friend? He wrote again. Ghost. You can lie to her that you stole it. She looked skeptical of those words. And she is watching with the others. Ghost. I'll do something to distract them. You just go write a note to the owner and I'll take care of leaving the money. The chestnut nodded. He approached the exit pretending he was going to leave. Ghost took the money needed to pay for the box from his body and with a sign asked Grimchild to distract Sasha. She nodded and gave a rather strong snub to the blonde, who complained and grabbed Grimchild's clothes, saying something they didn't quite understand, but she didn't seem too affected, and finished writing something on a piece of paper and put it on the counter. Ghost put the necessary money on the counter and then hurried out of the store. Sasha, you've crossed the bucking line, Batgirl. Grimchild, try to land even one hit, and I'll hit you back multiplied by 1,000 oxygenated slugs. Sasha, I'm going to dash. And ahem. They turned to her, looking at her closely, and Sasha and Grimchild recomposed themselves, stopping fighting. They approached the chestnut. Sasha, did you do it? She showed the box and Sasha smiled victoriously, and Grimchild pretended to be affected or horrified. They went to the park and there they decided to open the box. Sasha and Marcy were standing in front of and sitting on the bench in that playground, encouraging her to open it. And I guess I will. The box opened, little by little. Ghost began to notice a powerful energy coming out of that box, and before interrupting, a tricolor glow covered everyone present as they were blinded by the light. The trio and both Ghost and Grimchild disappeared from that place, leaving that park lonely, Amphibia and a well-known. It was raining heavily. The drops fell impacting against the ground. A brunette with bushy hair was hiding from the rain in a hollow log as she watched our protagonist in front of her along with Grimchild. Grimchild, Annie, is everything okay? She asked her friend worriedly. Neither she nor her father felt out of place since that dimension was a bit like their world, but they couldn't help but worry about their friend. And, is everything okay? Yes, of course. I'm in an unknown place. I don't know where Marcy and Sasha are, or even if they're okay. I'm dirty, not knowing where to find myself. I don't even know who lives here, because it wouldn't be okay, Grim. She said something hysterical. The girl was discouraged by her friend's response, and sighed regretfully. And I am sorry, it's just that I can't believe this happened, and worse. On my own birthday, she said, looking down. Grimchild hugged her. Grimchild, I understand, dear, she said understandingly, and hugged the now black-haired girl, starting to cry for being in that place. At least she didn't feel so alone since Ghost and Grimchild were there. But she was worried about her parents and her friends. Ghost was sitting while he took that music box out of Anne's backpack. He analyzed it thoroughly, noticing that the stones that had previously been green, pink, and blue respectively were now gray. He opened the box, confirming that the same thing didn't happen as when Anne opened the box. Seeing disappointment, he put the box in his backpack and just watched the rain fall and hit the now muddy ground, and broke away from the hug, thanking her friend as she needed this. I look at Ghost. And Ghost? The little ghost looked at the chestnut. And everything okay? He nodded, although deep down he was worried about Marcy. After all, he still hasn't forgotten that she is the first person he interacted with upon arriving in the human realm. And said dash. Before finishing, the three heard heavy footsteps which were approaching them. From between the trees a large silhouette, recognizable to Ghost, emerged. A green mantis came out furiously from between the trees and looked frantically everywhere, searching for something. Our alarmed protagonist came out of the log, worrying Anne. And Ghost, come back here! Our protagonist stood in front of the mantis, preparing himself when he realized that it did not come with good intentions. He pulled out his stinger ready to fight. The mantis noticed him and became even more upset when she noticed that Ghost was wearing a mask similar to the one who had attacked her. With a wild roar, he lunged at the little ghost who held his stinger ready to attack. But a kind of white needle was thrown to the mantis, which was seen tied by a thin silk thread in the hole of its handle. That needle was stuck into the head of the giant insect, which failed to pierce deeply into its head. The green insect looked at the place from which the weapon was thrown, annoyed to see that it was its attacker. Hornet, your fight is with me, beast. The insect launched itself from the tree it was on, lunging at the mantis and pulling its needle buried in the insect's tough skin. I take my needle, wielding it and ready to attack. Ghost, although excited by the appearance of his sister, ran towards the mantis's legs and with a strong swing of his stinger, cut off its legs. The mantis fell screaming in pain from being dismembered by the ghost. Hornet, surprised to see her brother there, shook her head and took the opportunity. He disappeared in a flash and sliced the mantis's neck, separating its head from its body. The body of the giant insect fell to the ground as green blood flowed out of it. Ghost shook his stinger, drawing the green blood from the insect. Then he looked at his sister in silence. Hornet, hello? She said, surprised, not knowing what to say exactly. Ghost partly ran to his sister and hugged her, excited to see her again. The sovereign of the throne of Hallownest, despite being surprised, reciprocated the hug. And, what's going on here? Hornet turned to the chestnut. Hornet, oh, you're one of those creatures made of slug skin, she said curiously. And what? I'm human. Ghost pulled at his sister's dress and beckoned her. Hornet, she's your friend. Grimchild, hello and Hornet hee, she said a little nervously. The insect, seeing the girl, ran to her and hugged her. Hornet, here's little Grim because you're like them. Grimchild, oops hee, I'll fix it now. She separated from Hornet, and red flames surrounded her, returning her to her previous form. Grimchild, Taran? He said smiling. Hornet happily took her by the shoulders only to then start shaking her. Hornet, you impertinent girl, how dare you do that stupid thing of following your uncle? You could have died. Angrily scolding. Grimchild, Auntie Hornet, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, he said with difficulty. Ghost pulled his sister's dress again, and she left his niece. Hornet understood what he wanted, so he let go of the girl. Ghost sat down in his previous spot and motioned for Hornet to sit next to him. I take Marcy's notebook out of her body, which fortunately didn't get wet when I got there since it was on her body before it started to rain. Ghost, since when are you here? Wrote. She remained thoughtful. Hornet, when our older brother ran off through a tunnel in Seer, I set out to go wherever he went. Flashback. Dear, where are you going, young lady? I turned to the old means of transportation. Hornet, I have to go find them. I can't stay here. Dear, but you don't even know where they went. I stopped after his words. Hornet, I think I know where they went. I started running to where I thought I had gone. After a few minutes of walking, I suddenly tripped. Hornet, ouch, what the hhh. I was interrupted as I saw a pool of void appear below me which absorbed me. Then I saw that I was on a kind of stone path, and a kind of metal carriage almost ran me over, which I dodged. Then a creature with strange skin came out of it and approached me. Oh God, listen, is this okay? He, like me, was surprised to see him. I shook my head and ran away from there. For some reason I felt that if I stayed there nothing good was going to happen to me. I was wandering around that place for a while, and I had to stay hidden because I came across more of those creatures and they were very surprised to see me. I decided that the most sensible thing to do was to hide until I found a shelter, and so I did. And wait, what did you eat? Hornet, I had to eat the flies that were there. And looked disgusted by that. Ghost, she's part spider and her race is used to eating those kinds of insects, and was surprised. Hornet, back to the topic. I was hiding in an abandoned building, and I also learned to speak the language of that world since there were some magazines there. And stop. How did you learn my language so easily? Ghost wrote. Ghost, she can also learn the language of another species in the same way just by seeing or reading a bit of it, since she is partly composed of void. Explained. He nodded, apologizing to a somewhat annoyed Hornet for the interruptions. Hornet, ahem, as I was saying, I was hiding for a few months and also learned to blend in without them finding out who I really was. I learned many things, including that the race that lived here called themselves humans, and through this medium I learned that this was another world. I was there for a few months until, well, a year later on a specific day while I was walking through the streets of what was called the place where Los Angeles was, I saw a kind of bright pillar of three-colored energy. I ran to that place hoping to find someone I knew, and I ran into two acquaintances this time. Hornet, brother. In the place where that energy had come from, I saw our brother accompanied by a shadow, which, upon seeing me, became excited and hugged me. I responded, and suddenly a pool of void appeared at our feet. Hornet, not again, I said, boring. That puddle absorbed us again, taking us to this place. End of flashback. Hornet, that would be all. And wait a minute, you came with Kim and Ghost's older brother. Hornet looked surprised. Hornet Kim? Ghost nodded and wrote. Ghost, it's a name that and gave to our brother. Hornet, oh, I look at the brunette, thanks for giving her a name, girl, she said gratefully. And my name is Nbunchui, call me a Hornet, right? Hornet, yes, a pleasure, and Nbunchui. They both shook hands. Everyone noticed how the rain began to stop, and sighed in relief as she watched the sun rise. Suddenly the trees began to move. Hornet, Ghost, Grimchild and stood on guard as the latter pulled a pink racket from her backpack and brandished it. From between the trees a black blur shot out towards the group which lunged at, and who fell to the ground with the creature that lunged at her, and began to scream in fear. Take it away, oh I'm sorry, it's you Kim. she said sadly. Wait, Kim, I'm so glad to see you, little one. He reciprocated the little receptacle's hug and then realized something. And wait, if you're here it means that. Sure enough, Pure Vessel came out of the trees, removing some leaves and branches from his mask and clothing. Seeing Ghost, Hornet, Grimchild and N, he ran towards them and then gave them a tight hug. Hornet, W, how nice to see you again, B bro, he said with difficulty. And how nice to see you too, my dear friend, said the same as Hornet. After a few minutes they separated and the now named Kim flew excitedly around the young Bunchui. And he, glad to see you too, friend. Hey. After Anne's call, everyone saw her. And W, what will we do now? They looked at each other, and the first to speak was Grimchild. Grimchild, now, what we must do is find better shelter. Hornet, about that me and the two of them have been working on it. Grimchild, oh then I take back what I said, now what we have to do is teach you how to fight, dear. And what? Grimchild, you may know Muay Thai and fencing, but you need to brush up on those skills and we'll teach you how to use the soul, too. And for what? Whose thing? I asked confused. Hornet, the soul is an energy that dwells within every living being. But very few insects manage to learn to harness it. And what is the probability that a human like me knows how to use it? I asked. Ghost, with the necessary training, you will learn to use it. You are also living with a species that learns to use that energy at birth. Explained. And okay, but who will train me? Ghost wrote. Ghost, my big brother, and I will teach you how to use the soul, me more than anything, since he will also teach you how to fight hand to hand with Hornet. I look at those mentioned and they nodded. And B, but we have to find Sasha and Marcy. Ghost took out the Void Heart amulet, and from it came 10 of his brothers. They saw Ghost and were moved, then hugged him, a hug that he reciprocated. Wrote, Ghost, please find Sasha and Marcy. Seeing this, the 10 became worried at the mention of the brunette and the blonde. After all, they were also able to live with them and became fond of them. The 10 present nodded worriedly and agreed to go 5 to look for the brunette and 5 to look for the blonde. Hornet, are you sure you want to send them? The Vessels turned to Hornet and hugged her. Hornet, ha ha ha, hello brothers. I didn't mention it, but Hornet has been visiting the Abyss from time to see her brothers and spend time with them and get to know them better. They parted, happy to see their sister again. Hornet, I'm also excited to see you, dear brothers. Be careful on the road, okay? They nodded, still happy to see Hornet. Ghost, please take care of yourselves, and if the situation gets complicated, come back. I don't want anything to happen to you, he said worriedly, despite being the one who made the request. Even though he was worried about sending them, that didn't take away from how strong and dangerous a vessel was in its shadow form, so he wasn't too worried. But he was worried about those 2 girls who are his friends. She did not detract from the concern she had for both of them, since being her friends, her concern was the same. His brothers took flight to explore the terrain and search for those 2 missing humans from the trio. And, are you sure you want to send them? It's just they worry me a lot. Hornet, they are stronger than one would think. They are not as harmless as they seem now. I look at the girl. Hornet, get ready, girl, because your training will be difficult. The young Bunchui swallowed hard at those words, already predicting that her training would be hell. And, if there is an almighty and kind God up above, please save me. Training. Grimchild, and where is that shelter? Hornet, not far from here, follow me. And started walking, but because of the muddy ground she slipped and almost fell. And wow, before falling she was caught by Pure Vessel, who put her on his back. Hornet, I suppose it would be ideal if you didn't go on foot, child. And she nodded. They started walking as Grimchild transformed back into her human form. Hornet, why did you become human again? I look at his aunt. Grimchild, I don't want to feel like the only human in the group, replied, smiling. She smiled gratefully at her friend's actions. Grimchild, by the way, why was that mantis following you? Hornet, I was walking around looking for the missing materials for the house, and well, that thing attacked me and I responded. Grimchild, oh. Hornet looked ahead. Hornet, we're almost there. They continued moving forward until they came to a house made of wood with a base made of stone. And wow, Hornet, we're lucky our big brother knows about construction. And looked at the vessel that was carrying her. And, how do you know all this? He remained thoughtful about how to explain it until Ghost gave him the notebook, and he thanked his brother, and then began to write. Pure Vessel. Since I started being trained as a vessel, I met all kinds of insects and learned many things from them, such as cooking, construction, mining, among other things. She nodded, surprised to know such things. They entered the house, seeing that it was very similar to a normal house, which surprised Anne. And this is awesome. Pure vessel left, and on the ground. Ghost looked around, noticing how nice the house was. Grimchild, why, where will we sleep? Hornet, we have beds for you in the basement. And seriously, she said excitedly. Hornet nodded. Hornet, come on. They followed her downstairs, and when they arrived, Anne was surprised. And wow, they look like beds from my world, he said, approaching the beds, noticing that they indeed resembled said beds. Hornet, yes, fortunately I'm good at knitting. And what stuffing do the pillows have? Hornet, the pillows are made only of my silk. Fortunately it is very comfortable to sleep on. Grimchild, wow, I thought your silk was only good as a weapon. Hornet, it is very durable and is just as lethal as a freshly polished stinger, but it can also be used for other things. Grimchild, I understand, and laid down on the bed, feeling how comfortable and soft it was. Ghost just stared at Anne. Ghost, Hornet, what's up, little ghost? He turned to his sister and wrote, Ghost, before we start her training, we need to solve the food problem. I don't think she'll want to eat insects while she's here. Hornet nodded at what he said. Hornet, by the way, I noticed that in this world there are larger versions of the vegetables in the human world. Are they useful? Ghost nodded. Grimchild, I'll go with you. You'll need enough help if there's any danger involved, she said determinedly. Ghost shook his head and started writing. Ghost, you stay here keeping in company, if possible my big brother, and you train her in the meantime. He wrote as a response. Hornet, if possible rest. It should not be comfortable to sit or lie on a wet, cold, hard floor. And you have no idea. Grimchild, although she initially wanted to protest, stopped when she learned that she could spend time with and talk to her. Ghost and his sister set off up the stairs. Hornet, see you later, girls, and we're waiting for you, she said with a smile. Once they left, Grimchild went to Anne's bed and sat down across from her. They both looked at each other in silence until Anne spoke first. And I wonder, are you and Ghost really related? It's just you look like you're from different species. Grimchild, oh, about that, Dad told me I had another father, who disappeared one day without a trace. And did you use the excuse that you were going to buy cigarettes? Grimchild, what? No, haha, I don't really remember much from back then. My mind is blurry, and lowered her head slightly. And, can I ask something? Grimchild, of course, dear. And you miss your world? A little surprised by the unexpected question, she replied. Grimchild, of course, even if it doesn't show. I miss my home a lot, but, Grimchild, but once I leave I won't see you again, and that worries me. I don't want to leave you alone, and Dad, I'm sure he feels the same. But they have to do it, right? Grimchild looked away. Grimchild, I guess so, but even if I have to, I don't want to leave you, and smiled, and Grimchild stood up and looked at the Thai girl. Grimchild, come, it's time for us to train. The young brunette nodded and followed her. Time skipped 5 minutes. And so, what will I do first? Pure Vess wrote on the ground. Pure Vessel. The first thing you'll train will be your reflexes and your way of fighting. And great, sounds easy. Grimchild, hee, that's what you think, said with a kind smile. The chestnut shivered and then had to dodge a completely red fireball that turned a tree behind her to ashes. And hey, what's your great idea? She said, annoyed. Grimchild, train you, my dear. The chestnut had to dodge more red flames directed at her, which she dodged with difficulty. Fortunately, Grimchild can control the intensity of the heat of his flames, and of course, the force with which he throws his fireballs is enough to make it difficult for Anne to dodge them, and slowly began to get into the swing of things. Every minute that passed he became more tired until Grimchild stopped throwing those projectiles. Grimchild, very well, rest a while, Annie. She sighed tiredly and sat down on a log that was nearby. Grimchild approached alongside Pure Vessel. Grimchild, everything okay? And yes, or something like that, I'm very tired, she said, smiling tiredly. Grimchild, oh yeah, by the way. And dash. Grimchild approached the brunette's forehead and kissed her while a reddish aura surrounded her. And she said, blushing at the sudden action. Grimchild, a small measure of protection to prevent any accidents during your training, my dear. Grimchild walked away from her with a mischievous smile on his face, and shook her head, wiping away her blush and watching the little bat walk away. Pure Vessel caught the young woman's attention, and she looked at him. Pure Vessel, before we start teaching you how to fight, We must improve your endurance. She nodded. And I wonder how Ghost and Hornet are doing, she said worriedly. Meanwhile, Ghost and Hornet were fighting with some kind of plant that looked like a combination between a tomato and a carnivorous plant. Hornet, this thing is very familiar, don't you think, brother? Ghost thought about it, and remembered those plants that tried to eat him when he walked over them on Green Path. I looked at them and saw that they were somewhat similar. The vessel dodged a vine aimed at him with a jump, and then took out the monarch wings and began to fly, while Hornet dodged and cut through all those vines on the plant, dodging the jaws of those living plants as well. Hornet, we must find a way to immobilize her so we can harvest her tomatoes. Shouts to her brother. Ghost nodded and flew through the vines, tangling them together to have one less problem. Once he did so, he flew as high as the heads of that red plant. One of them lunged at the protagonist, and he dodged it. A white aura appeared around the body of the vessel, and then expelled a kind of white spirit with black eyes. After hitting the plant, it shot out at another of its heads, knocking both of them down and leaving them stunned. Ghost set about distracting the remaining head by signaling to Hornet. She nodded and began to harvest the tomatoes. Hornet, great, now how are we going to carry this out? He muttered as he placed a tomato next to 3 others. The insect didn't realize that one of the heads knocked down by its larger, more specific brother was about to attack it. Suddenly a void claw swiped at that head, which screamed in pain and turned furiously at the person responsible for the attack. Hornet turned around at that roar and was surprised to see Hornet Kim, the aforementioned, without ceasing to be alert, happily greeted his sister, who smiled under her mask, happy to see him. Ghost, for his part, found himself cornered by 2 heads of that plant, one of which had recovered from the blow of the vengeful spirit. Both of them lunged at the vessel, which simply plummeted down, causing both heads to collide with each other, being knocked out by the mutual impact. He flew closer to Hornet, who spoke. Hornet, guess who joined the fun? Said, taking the medium-sized tomato of the 4. Ghost looked at Kim, who was struggling with that head without much difficulty. Hornet, should I harvest more, or are these enough? I asked, pointing to the other 3 tomatoes. Ghost wrote. Ghost, that will be enough for both and to feed herself and to grow them. Hornet, don't you think if we do that they'll grow more like that beast? I asked, pointing at the plant. Ghost, we can modify the seeds with Alma so they're not a problem. And we can also look for more vegetables like these. I don't want and to survive on just tomatoes. Wrote. Hornet nodded. Hornet, Kim, let's go. The small shadow nodded as well and enlarged its void claws and grabbed the plant's head, then smashed it into the ground, knocking it out in the process. Hornet, aren't we going to kill her? Ghost denied. Ghost, it doesn't pose much of a threat, it's just a creature acting on instinct. Hornet, that mantis we killed was also acting on instinct, said sarcastically. Ghost looked at her and then face-bombed. Ghost, it doesn't matter, let's just go. Ghost made a pool of void appear below him, and the tomatoes Hornet harvested, then sank into it, and appeared near the shelter. Hornet, so how are we doing now? I asked, looking at the 4 tomatoes. Ghost and Kim produced some void tentacles from their backs with which they easily carried the 3 tomatoes. They walked until they reached where Pure Vessel, Grimchild and were. They saw and doing push-ups. And 98, 99, 100. The girl fell to the ground exhausted while breathing heavily. He turned around, landing on his back on the ground. And this is hell. Hornet, it's just the beginning, girl, said the weaver. And Ola Hornet. Hornet, you look bad, girl, he said, feeling sorry for the girl. And, of course not, I still can. He tried to get up, but to no avail. As soon as he applied a little force he felt a hellish pain in his arms. But she fell exhausted to the ground. Ghost gently placed the tomatoes they had collected on the ground and approached the girl, concerned. And Hola Ghost. This one just wrote. Ghost. Hello, and please don't move, he said, putting his hand on the girl's chest. And, what are you going to? She was interrupted when a white aura surrounded her, and a light layer of dust formed around her. Little by little he felt the pain fade away. Once that aura disappeared, and was surprised and sat down feeling more or less like new. And, it doesn't hurt anymore, she said, surprised. Hornet looked at Pure Vessel with annoyance. Hornet, why did you let him get so hard? He got nervous and wrote on the ground. Pure Vessel. I told him if it was possible, to do 100 push-ups. I didn't ask him to push himself that hard. Sorry, he wrote, looking embarrassed. Hornet sighed. Hornet, good. And whoa, where did they get these tomatoes? They're huge, she said excitedly. Hornet, we found a way to keep you from starving, kid, and thank you, you are the best. I hug Hornet as I say that, and she blushes in embarrassment. Pure Vessel looked at Ghost and wrote on the ground, Pure Vessel. I'll see what I can cook with this, as long as you find some firewood and something to go with the tomato. Ghost nodded and headed into the woods. Grimchild, I'll go with you, Dad, he said smiling. Ghost was surprised to see the little bat appear out of nowhere, but he nodded to her. Grimchild, great, she said excitedly. They both started walking while and stayed with Kim and Hornet comfortably. Once father and daughter walked away, Grimchild spoke in a somewhat sad tone of voice. Grimchild, Dad? He looked at his daughter, curious about what she wanted to tell him. Grimchild, you know how Sasha is with Anne, right? He nodded. He knew what the relationship between the two was like, and he knew that their friendship was toxic. Grimchild, you and I both know how Anne thinks about friendship and how it works, and I look at her, Grimchild, and I would like to help her understand that. I want her to know what true friendship is like, and I would like you to help me. Ghost was happy about that and nodded, happy that his daughter made that decision. Although the question was on his mind, how are your brothers? Somewhere else. 5 shadows were flying over the forest of that dimension looking for some sign of the person who sent them to look for their brother. The other 5 split up to look for the Taiwanese woman, so that's why they weren't with them. The shadows descended into the forest to begin looking for any sign of the girl they were looking for. They searched for a few minutes until one of them felt their presence not far away. They flew following that presence, and arrived at a tower made of stone which was illuminated by the light of the sun. They flew towards the place where that presence came from. They came to a window with thick bars, and looking inside they found who they were looking for, and next to her was someone else. Good morning, sleepyhead, said mockingly Sasha. Hello, Captain Frog. The amphibian being growled in annoyance, and looking at the blonde said, I'm an insolent brat toad. He said angrily, Sasha, aren't they the same? Of course not. There are differences. Sasha, seriously? Like what? I didn't come to talk to you about my race, girl. I came to ask you a question, he said seriously. Sasha, what about me? The toad showed a cruel and macabre smile. You will be food for herons. One of the shadows became worried upon hearing this and wanted to attack the toad, but was stopped by his brothers, who convinced him to wait for the toad to leave. Sasha, ha ha, very funny, Froggy. But I don't think I'd be any good to you dead. Looks at her nails. What do you want? Tell me if there are more like you, he said seriously. Sasha frowned and stopped looking at her nails and looked at the toad. Sasha, no, she answered sharply. Oh, you're not so insolent anymore. Judging by your reaction, it seems you're not telling me anything. Sasha, I'm telling you the truth. What's your name? I'm Captain Filth. Welcome to Toad Tower. Ah, Sasha, Filth. Sasha, you'll be held captive here until you tell me what I want. With that he turned around and started walking away. Sasha, I'll give you luck with that, Mugri. The toad stopped dead in his tracks and said, a little bewildered, Filth, what did you call me, girl? She ignored him and simply grabbed a stone lying there and started scratching the wall, adding a line to it. Sasha, goodbye, Frog. Filth, I'm a toad, you insolent girl. She just ignored him, receiving a grunt of annoyance from the toad and a slam of the door that echoed in the room. Sasha, take the door. Raising her voice with a mocking smile, the blonde softened her expression and looked at the window. Sasha, what the ch guys? The shadows crossed the bars and pounced on the blonde, who hugged them in response. Sasha, how nice to see you here. Wait a minute, if you're here it means that. Nodded. Sasha, how nice. Hey, could you send a message to Ghost? I'm thinking of staying here for now since I feel like I'll have fun with these guys, haha. Laughs at the idea of annoying the toad called Filth. They looked at her sadly. Sasha, ooh, don't be like that. I promise that when I can I'll play with you. They were moved and hugged her again, which she responded to. Sasha, do you have something to write with and a piece of paper? One of them pulled out a sheet of parchment and a quill from his body. Sasha, perfect. I take the objects and start writing on the sheet. Once he finished the letter he gave it to the shadow, who gave him the pen and the sheet of paper. Sasha, give this to Ghost and take care of yourselves on the way. Yes. The 5 nodded and, even with a little sadness for having to leave her there, they left. Sasha watched the shadows retreat, a little worried about what might happen to them. Sasha, I hope I don't regret this. Ends progress exploring Amphibia, and was eating tomato with what looked like egg. It turns out that Ghost and Pure Vessel, when they went to look for something to accompany Anne's food, in a section of the forest they found some eggs of an enormous size which they had to shrink with souls so that they were the size of an ostrich egg. They obviously had difficulties since a giant heron noticed their actions and attacked them, but it didn't take them long to defeat it. It's been a week since they arrived at Amphibia, and they've been getting their bearings. Ghost, more specifically, has been doing some reconnaissance these days, discovering that there's a lot of forest miles from their shelter. Which brings us to now. The chestnut was eating something quickly due to hunger while Ghost and company looked at her, and Grimchild scolded her. Grimchild, and don't eat so fast, you'll choke. Scolding, and stopped eating so quickly and looked embarrassed about it, and swallowing. I am sorry, hee, I'm just hungry. Apologized. Grimchild sighed in resignation. Ghost, once you eat, rest for a while and you guys. Wrote looking at her brothers and Grimchild. Don't be hard on her. Do simple exercises and not so hard. She needs to learn to fight, not to be a weapon. The three nodded while Pure Vessel was embarrassed to understand why he said that. Ghost simply stood up from his spot and started walking towards the forest. Hornet, stop, little Ghost. Where are you going? I asked worriedly. Ghost stopped and wrote. Ghost, I'm going to explore the place. We need to better understand the terrain we're on and figure out how to move as quickly as possible. Hornet, we'll go with you, he said firmly. Ghost denied. Ghost, you guys stay and train with and I'll let Grim supervise her so she doesn't overexert herself. Kim, you're coming with me. Hearing this, the shadow became excited and followed his brother. After all, he had also wanted to explore the place, but was denied the right to do so alone. Grimchild just looked at her father, who nodded knowingly. Once away with his brother accompanying him, Ghost began to walk. Ghost walked away from where they were looking around, seeing trees, vines, mud, plants, etc. He also saw the occasional giant insect. Some tried to attack him, but he and his brother had no difficulty in exterminating them. Ghost spent the whole day exploring with his brother and also took the opportunity to start making a new map of the places he had seen. Our protagonist equipped himself with the whimsical compass to better locate himself, and to be better accompanied he used the Weaver's song. 3 small white spiders appeared in a white trail, and upon seeing Ghost they pounced on him, making sounds that could be interpreted as them being happy to see him again. Once the spiders separated from him, he began to walk, followed by his brother and the Weavers. This time they climbed onto his body and landed on it. He continued walking until, coming out of a bush, he saw something that shocked him. In front of him was something that could be described as a village, only the houses seemed smaller, even as small as the houses in his world. What shocked him was the fact that the inhabitants of that town were not human, but they were frogs. Ghost hid in the bush he came out of, telling the Weavers and his brother not to move from there. He looked at the town for a few more moments before turning around and quickly leaving. I didn't know if they were hostile or not, but I didn't want to take any risks. The little ghost simply disappeared into the bushes, beckoning Kim to follow him. Seeing that it was already getting dark, Ghost decided to go back to where the others were. On the way he remained thoughtful. If frogs live here, does that mean humans don't exist? In fact, these frogs and their lifestyles are very similar to those of humans living in the countryside. Minutes later Ghost could see the house in the distance, so he headed towards it. Once he arrived he found it tired and being carried by Grimchild, who didn't seem too tired from carrying her. And put me down now, it wasn't that bad, she said, kicking like a child. The human-shaped bat shook her head. Grimchild, I told you to stop, but even so, you decided to keep going even when your body couldn't take it anymore. And I could do more. Annoyed protest. Grimchild, having a vein in your forehead the size of Mount Everest doesn't mean you're capable. Counterattack. And silly, Grimchild, stubborn. And so began a somewhat childish argument between the two girls, which became more and more childish with each passing minute. Ghost looked at them silently, like, are you seriously fighting over something like that? Hornet, I see you're back, she said, looking at the girls with tiredness. Ghost, have you been like this all day? Hornet, well, something like that. That girl is very stubborn and somewhat self-centered, replied. And Batgirl trash. Grimchild, what did you say? And what did you hear? Grimchild, silly. And silly. Grimchild, ugly. And you'll be very pretty, won't you? Grimchild, of course. she said, falsely conceited, and Grimchild, and slash Grimchild, ha 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 ha, laughed. Hornet slash Ghost, who were fighting just a moment ago, was the thought that crossed both of their minds. The girls laughed for a moment before stopping and wiping away a tear of laughter. Hornet, good thing you're done, and we'll continue tomorrow, and nodded. Grimchild, Dad, she said, happily approaching him. How did it go? And hello, Ghost. Greeting, smiling. The little ghost returned the greeting and then took out the map he had made of the place and showed it to his daughter. Grimchild, wow, it looks very good, she said, surprised. Ghost just nodded and yawned and leaned her head on Grimchild's shoulder. Ghost, I think it would be best if we went to sleep. We've had a very tiring day today, he wrote. Grimchild and nodded in agreement and turned to go straight to the house, being followed by Kim, the little weavers, Hornet, and Pure Vessel. Once inside the house, whoever went to their respective beds got ready. Once in the basement, Grimchild laid down on her bed. The bat stretched, yawning, and headed to her bed. Grimchild, good night, Dad. Yawning, Ghost nodded. Kim simply stepped into the amulet, and the weavers laid down at the foot of her bed. Ghost silently climbed the stairs to leave the basement, and once in the main room he left. He walked out the front door only to see 5 of his siblings floating away. Ghost was relieved to see them safe and sound, then wrote, Ghost, did they find her? I asked. The 5 nodded, relieving Ghost. Ghost, and where is she? He asked, noticing the blonde's absence. One of the shadows approached him and took out a paper from his body which he handed to him. Ghost looked at it intrigued and opened it, seeing that there was something written on it. He instantly recognized Sasha's handwriting. Hey kiddo, I know you're worried and all, but I want to let you know that I'm fine and that I'm in a good place. I'm worried about you. I want you to take care of yourselves and, more importantly, take care of and too. I'm not much for sentimentality, but I also want you to be well. I hope to see you again soon, at Sasha. That was what he read and closed the letter. He looked at his brothers, who looked away, discouraged. Ghost approached them and patted each of their heads, letting them know that he wasn't upset but rather grateful for what they had done. They rejoiced and hugged Ghost, causing him to almost gasp for air. They separated excitedly and Ghost simply handed them the Void Heart amulet, and they got into it. Ghost put it away and headed inside the house before going to sleep. The next day, Ghost woke up standing up and getting out of his bed as he saw Grimchild and then sleeping peacefully. The ghost of Hallownest headed upstairs, seeing that Hornet was awake. Hornet, good morning, little ghost. The weaver greets. Ghost returned the greeting and then wrote, Ghost, good morning, Hornet, did you sleep well? He typed and asked. Hornet nodded. Hornet, our big brother is making breakfast, he said, starting to walk toward the exit. Without the two noticing, the amulet that contained their brothers increased the brightness of its eyes, and then Kim left. They both looked at him and greeted him, which he responded to with a hug of emotion. Kim flew straight outside and began flying vigorously through the air. Hornet, sigh, he definitely has a lot of energy, he said, turning to his older brother. Ghost just nodded. Grimchild, yawned good morning, and stretching, it smells delicious, she said. The bat and the chestnuts said as they climbed the stairs while rubbing their eyes. And oops, sorry, good morning, Ghost. The brunette waves. Ghost just waved back. The three of them started walking outside, and when and set foot outside, she was suddenly attacked by a certain shadow who avoided being so abrupt and avoiding making her fall. And good morning, Kim, she said, smiling. The girl hugged the shadow, reciprocating its hug. After they separated and headed over to where Pure Vessel was, which was making a huge egg. And hey, now that you noticed, he doesn't have a name, she said, pointing at the vase. Ghost, Hornet, and Kim looked at each other, and then looked at Anne. And what? Ghost, we'll leave that task to you, wrote, and nodded. N.A., what name do you suggest for Pure Vessel? I can't think of one right now. A few minutes later the food was ready and Anne was surprised. And this is rice. In front of her was a wooden bowl filled with rice, topped with egg and diced tomatoes, and looked at the plate in shock and ate with her spoon. And it's delicious, she murmured in surprise. The girl began to cry with happiness, very happy to finally taste the food from her world. Once he finished, he wiped his tears and looked at his friends. And how did they get this? She asked. Grimchild, well, let's just say that with a grain of earth we tried to turn it into something else with the help of the soul. We didn't know if it would work, and boy, were we surprised when it did. reported happily, and excitedly put her plate aside and stood up to happily hug her friends. And they are the best, she said, smiling. They just smiled and reciprocated as Kim hugged them all happily. Once everyone had finished eating and asked, "And by the way, can you turn objects into other things?" I asked, intrigued. "Hornet, we tried it with one from your math notebook, and it didn't work. Apparently, the soul only modifies natural or organic matter," she explained, and looked disappointed. "Grimchild, but don't be discouraged, because now that you're training, we can teach you how to use the soul," he said, smiling, and perked up when she heard that. "And really?" I asked with stars in her eyes. They nodded, which made her even more excited. They went to the back of the house where they always trained her. Once there, everyone surrounded Anne. "And so now what?" Unsure question. "Hornet, to teach you this you must synchronize your body with your spirit." And the girl looked at Hornet as if he had grown another head. "And that sounded like you were some kind of monk or something, you know?" she said. Ghost just proceeded to write. "Ghost, what you must do to control the soul is find a way to create a connection in the deepest part of your being. It is not just meditating and reflecting. It is about synchronizing your spirit and manifesting it as if it were a part of your body," explained the ghost of Hallownest, and despite being a little hesitant, nodded. "And I understand, but where do I start?" I asked. Everyone sat down except for Kim, who just sat on Hornet's lap. "Grimchild, start by sitting down, dear," he said with a smile, and just proceeded to sit down. "Hornet, close your eyes, calm your mind, and think about everything that's happened just now. Who are you? What's your goal? Why are you fighting?" the weaver said, closing her eyes beneath her mask, and did as requested. "Grimchild, before we start, Annie," speaking in a serious, grim voice, "you should know that all the questions you have to ask yourself have a deeper meaning than a superficial one. Who you are is much more than just saying, 'I am Nbunchui.' The question you should ask yourself is, who is Nbunchui?" The girl explained seriously, and opened her eyes when she heard that. That question? They had already asked it to him once and he hadn't understood, and now, I didn't know who he was yet, and I didn't know what to say. She didn't know who she really was. My training continues and my new sword, and dodging a slash from Ghost. "Hey, you almost cut me in two," I complained. After saying that, I saw Ghost approach me. "Grimchild, don't worry about it. Dad knows what he's doing. Otherwise he wouldn't be attacking you like that," my friend shouted, sitting on a rock next to her uncle and aunt, and dodging a lunge. "We can't continue with my training." Ghost stopped his attacks, sheathed his stinger, and began to write. "Ghost, do you feel ready?" I remained silent after his question, to which he sighed. "Ghost, I thought so, and okay, yes, but Mia." I really didn't know what to say. I still want to keep learning, but that question left me with doubt. "Who am I?" I felt Ghost start to touch my shoulder. I looked at him. "Ghost, follow me." Upon reading that, he simply made a sign that the others understood, and he alone began to walk while I began to follow him. I followed him into the woods and he started walking while I just watched him in silence. A silence I broke. "And where are we going?" he wrote. "Ghost, to a relaxing place. Since you still can't learn to control the soul, I'll teach you everything I know about the art of the sting." That's what he wrote. When I read that, I looked at it. But that's not what I want," I said, looking down. Ghost proceeded to write again. "Ghost, we must develop your physical and mental abilities. Remember, that is not essential for now." Wrote in response. But what if he didn't make it? "Ghost, I know you're capable of doing it. The trick is to keep trying. But what if I disappointed everyone?" "Ghost, try not to disappoint yourself. We'll be proud of what you've done, and our friendship isn't based on achieving or not achieving something. It's based on trust and mutual support." I was surprised by those words. I still don't understand their meaning. Isn't that how friendship works? I mean, if I don't do something for a friend, or if I don't do it, that person will stop being my friend. But, Ghost, look! Suddenly Ghost took out that strange black amulet, and its eyes shone, taking out two of his brothers who, upon seeing Ghost and Anne, began to surround them with enthusiasm. I watched as Ghost started writing and then showed the notebook. "Ghost, they suffered just like me, forced to repress our feelings by a father who only saw us as a lock. But despite everything, over time they learned to heal that wound together." As I read that, I looked at the shadows, which hugged each other happily. "Ghost, It wasn't an easy road for us, and yours won't be either, but we're here for you. We're not your friends for convenience or anything. We're your friends because of who you are. He typed again, but I don't even know who I am, I said, looking down. Suddenly I felt Ghost stop walking, making me stop too. Ghost. We're better off here. After reading that, I looked around, noticing how a beautiful field of trees, flowers, and bushes that were not so excessively abundant appeared. And wow, Ghost. When I went to explore the area, I came across this beautiful place and told myself it would be perfect for a quiet workout. I looked at my friend watching as a bit of that liquid known as void formed in a puddle. From this came a kind of dark sword that seemed very sharp. Suddenly I saw Ghost throw it at me and I reflexively caught it. And I could see how Ghost suddenly attacked me with his stinger, to which I responded by covering myself with that sword. And, let me know before you do that, I said, something annoyed. As I could, I pushed Ghost back. After all, despite his size, his strength is quite enormous. Ghost, recomposing himself and writing. We will train your hand-to-hand combat skills. Your reflexes are already at a considerable level, and you will be able to do this training without any problem, so don't worry. He explained. I sighed. And fine, but don't do that so suddenly again. I sighed. Ghost. I wanted to check your reflexes and they're fine, but they need training. I looked at him. And so, shall we leave my training with the soul for another day? Ghost. We must make sure to strengthen you as much as possible. And don't forget that discovering yourself takes more than just a week. Until then, this will be the training you will follow from now on. I sighed in resignation. And okay, you win. Ghost wrote something again. Ghost. The first thing I want you to do is practice simple movements and attacks first. I looked at the void sword he had given me. Ghost. The more you use that sword, the harder it will become. I'll give it to you for now, and maybe we can look for some suitable metal for a better sword. I nodded only to see my friend typing again. Ghost. Get into combat stance. I did as requested, adopting a Muay Thai fighting stance. Ghost analyzed my pose for a while I just looked confused by his request. I saw him start writing again. Ghost. We must improve your combat stance, so you are exposed to many attacks from enemy weapons. I read. And I'm in a Muay Thai fighting pose, that's obvious. I said, confused. He wrote again. Ghost. The problem is that your posture is obviously at a medium level, almost reaching the level of low. I will help you and instruct you so that you learn to use both your weapon and your body for self-defense. He explained. There I understood what he meant, and I could see how he got into a combat pose as well. Ghost. Okay, your fight begins now, he said. My gaze became determined, and only with that did I know my training had begun. Minutes later. Damn, I can't believe this, I couldn't even land a single hit on him. I felt exhausted, and I could see Ghost approaching me with a bowl made of void which contained water. He gave it to me and I sat down to drink the water, feeling how fresh and sweet it was. And wow, where did you get this water? I saw how he wrote again. Ghost. Use soul to generate it, was his simple response. Wow, that energy is definitely very powerful, it's a shame I don't know how to use it yet. Ghost. Be patient and don't rush things and just enjoy this moment of tranquility. Being here, you probably won't always be able to do that, he wrote, sitting next to me. I nodded and just proceeded to look at the sky while drinking water. And Ghost. He looked at me. And do you miss your world? He seemed a little surprised by my question. I guess I really did take him by surprise, haha. Ghost. Yeah, I miss them. I looked down for a moment, but he touched my shoulder to make me look at him while I went back to writing. Ghost. But now I have you too. After all, you are my best friends and I can't leave you aside because I want to return to my world. Replied. With a smile I left the bowl of water next to me and proceeded to hug my friend, which he reciprocated. Once I finished the water and was also recovered, I woke up more energetic than ever. And let's continue with the training, I said with a smile. I could see he was excited too, and he stood up, ready to rush me and start training once more. Meanwhile, little Grimchild was walking peacefully through the vast forest of that unknown swampy dimension. The bat jumped up to the branches of a tree and then climbed to the top to watch the beautiful sunset. Grimchild, the view really looks beautiful, said while looking at the sunset. Suddenly a small shadow appeared behind her, which she noticed instantly. Grimchild, Uncle Kim, what are you doing here? Kim. Her eyes just curved upwards, making it look like she was smiling. Grimchild, okay, I know you didn't want to leave me alone, it's just that. Head down. The little shadow looked at his niece and stroked her back with concern. Grimchild, I feel bad for leaving those doubts to Anne. I'm supposed to be her friend, I shouldn't make her think things like that, she said with her eyes lowered. Hornet, you shouldn't feel bad about it. Grimchild turned to her aunt in surprise. Hornet, I was worried that you were so thoughtful about going into the forest. You don't usually do that, she said, getting closer. Grimchild, well, I appreciate your concern, and Hornet, really, haha, he said, smiling. The weaver took her niece by the shoulder. Hornet, Grim, I understand that you worry about and even that you feel bad for making her think about that existential problem, but it's something that sooner or later would happen. Grimchild, but I didn't want to be the one to make her feel that way, he said, rubbing his shoulder. Hornet sighed. Hornet, I've never had any friends. In fact, I had to adapt to such a wild and cruel world at a young age since what happened to my mother, but since I was with my brothers, I understood what it meant to have a family and, more importantly, friends, and that's why I recommend you keep it up. You're a great friend despite everything. Grimchild was encouraged by those words. Grimchild, really? Hornet, you're a wonderful girl, Grim, but I couldn't really talk, she said with a smile. Next, Grimchild hugged her aunt, who reciprocated, followed by Kim, who was happy to see her niece with her spirits recovered. They both smiled at the action of the little shadow. Hornet, hey, how about we find our big brother and explore this forest? Kim nodded and Grimchild jumped with excitement. Grimchild, sure, I'd love to. Hornet, okay, then let's go back. They both nodded and started walking towards their shelter, returning to Anne and Ghost. I clashed my void sword once more against Ghost's stinger, producing sparks of a somewhat dark color and applying pressure. With the strength I could muster, I pushed my friend and then recovered and made a horizontal slash directly at his neck, which he dodged. Without me noticing, when he bent down he took the opportunity to do a sweep which instantly unbalanced me, making me fall. And ugh, I complained. I recovered from the blow and used my sword in time to stop an attack from his stinger while now on the ground. Suddenly he stopped applying pressure against my sword, catching me off guard and somewhat unbalancing my grip on my weapon. Taking advantage of that fact, Ghost used one of his feet and kicked my sword, causing it to spin in the air and stick next to me. I was going to take it, but I felt Ghost threaten me with the tip of his gun, with a look that said, "Surrender." And I smiled. "You still haven't beaten me, you know?" He looked confused after hearing what I did, only to see how with a quick movement of my arm I made a sweep that didn't give him time to react, making him fall. I quickly recomposed myself and took my sword and then attacked him, making him defend himself with his stinger in the same way I did. "And I got you," I said with a smile. That smile faded when I suddenly saw him turn into a shadow and then launch himself in front of me, passing through me like a ghost. "And what?" That's what I said, shocked, as I looked at where Ghost was technically above me. I managed to see how a kind of white specter with black eyes shot out of it, causing me to cover myself with my sword once again, waiting for the impact. When his attack collided with my weapon I could see how my sword had absorbed the specter, beginning to shine, alternating between black and white. "And what?" Ghost landed and looked at the sword in surprise. In moments, the image of the sword changed from a completely black sword to a white-edged sword with a black hilt, while the sunset light reflected off the blade like a negative photo filter. In the part between the edge and the hilt you could see a kind of white flame with eyes similar to those of Ghost and his brothers. "And what just happened?" I asked, seeing the appearance of her sword. Ghost approached the sword and examined it with his eyes, noticing that its alloy was a combination of the soul of his attack and the void it was composed of, but there were also traces of the same metal from which his sting was forged. My friend caught my attention and curiously I asked, "And what's going on?" He pulled out his stinger and swung it around, slashing at the air. I didn't know what he meant until I saw him point at me and then repeat the action. There I understood what he wanted me to do, and preparing myself I grabbed my new sword and then pulled it back, feeling it as light as my racket. In moments I slashed the air with my sword and a white slash with black lines shot out at a tree, hitting it and cutting it like butter. "And what the hell?" In moments I dropped the sword in shock only to then fix my gaze behind the tree, noticing that there were a total of 5 felled trees. I looked at the sword I threw and took it. "And what?" I watched as Ghost started typing and came up to me, then showed me what he had written. Ghost. Apparently the void alloy in the sword absorbed my attack, causing the sword to assimilate it and combine into one. Oh yeah. And apparently the void alloy transmuted, turning your sword into a material and metallic form. I was surprised and looked at the sword, which shone like a bright mirror. And so, can I use soul? Ghost. His capabilities are unknown. I'm not sure, but it's a possibility. Answered. I felt excited when I heard that and looked at my new sword, but I realized something. And so, my training will be harder? Ghost looked at me for a moment, then made a sort of sign making me shiver. Ghost. But don't worry, we'll experiment a little with your new sword to discover its capabilities and abilities. I saw him respond, making me sigh with half relief. Although the brunette didn't notice it, one could see how the image of that flame on her sword began to shine in a throbbing way while beating like a heart. Meanwhile, in a completely dark place, illuminated by a small and beautiful white light which appeared as a kind of spectrum similar to the shadows of the vessels, with the difference that it was completely white. He opened his eyes, black as night, looking around, noticing his completely dark surroundings. He tilted his head curiously. "Hello?" she said with a completely innocent, soft, adorable and feminine voice. Ghost. The little ghost woke up on a bench, surrounded by a desolate darkness. Only darkness was visible except for an orange light and a blue light coming from the left and right respectively. The little ghost of Hallownest followed the orange light until he came to a door that was giving off some kind of bright orange spore or smoke. The vessel entered that door that kept the infection at bay. Once he did, he saw him, the one who had been chosen as the seal that would ravage the light in the dreams of every insect in the kingdom. Pure vessel, his brother. He looked chained and imprisoned. His torn cape showed his body as black as night and his orange eyes, giving an indication that he was not in his right mind. Ghost instantly proceeded to wield his stinger, approaching the chains that imprisoned him and breaking them one by one. Once his brother did it, and he stood up free. Pure vessel, grahhhhhhhhhhhhhh, roared like a wild beast. Our protagonist woke up excited and breathing somewhat agitatedly as he stood up, jumping out of his bed. He proceeded to walk slowly towards the basement exit. He needed fresh air. Once outside, he started walking towards the forest without noticing that a silhouette was watching him leave and then disappearing in a leap. The vase remained thoughtful. That dream was partly a bad memory. The truth was that it was one of the things that tormented him the most. Remembering what happened to his brothers, not having prevented it, or at least not being there to prevent it, he felt helpless and very frustrated when thinking about that. He heard the vessel turn around to see where the sound came from, and wielding his stinger at monstrous speed blocked an attack. "Hornet, it's good that you were paying attention, brother," said the weaver. Ghost effortlessly pushed his stinger forward, sending Hornet flying, then recomposing herself in the air and landing on a tree trunk, propelling herself between the leaves. "Hornet, why did you come out?" she asked, taking advantage of the echo provided by the forest. Ghost just wielded his stinger, cautiously looking around. Hornet could sense what Ghost meant even without speaking. "Hornet, you know you couldn't avoid that, but he had to be there. Hornet, you can't save everyone, brother. He will save those he can then. Hornet, get off your high horse." Suddenly some leaves on one of the trees moved, showing a shine reflected by the moonlight. A volley of spikes rushed towards our protagonist, and he, spinning on his axis, deflected the projectile with his stinger. He wasn't in a cloud. "Hornet, you know deep down that this couldn't be avoided." "That's a lie. He wasn't there. If he had been, then he would have been able to. He could have done it." "Hornet, how exactly?" "Hornet, I thought so." Suddenly her sister's silhouette passed behind her, causing Ghost to throw a slash which she dodged. "Hornet, there is no, would have, Ghost." She didn't know that. "Hornet, maybe you don't know." Once again the weaver passed behind Ghost, who slashed again. "Hornet, but that doesn't change the fact that you couldn't have done anything." "He was wrong, maybe he was." "Hornet, maybe so." "What?" Hornet then flew faster around Ghost until she was back up in the trees. Ghost, already fed up, quickly turned to where he saw Hornet, then fixed his gaze on a place, and then threw a vengeful spirit there. "Hornet, ack!" her sister screamed, falling in the middle of the field, then quickly positioned herself in front of her and threatened her with her stinger. She had won. "Hornet, ha ha!" River. Ghost was confused by that. "Hornet, you still haven't beaten me, brother." Ghost watched as his sister pulled on a light, almost invisible thread of cobweb. In an instant, thousands of those spiked balls were thrown out of the leaves of the trees directly at Ghost. Hornet stood up and jumped back into the trees. Ghost looked at the spiked balls coming towards him. Suddenly thousands of faces appeared in their eyes, grimacing in horror and suffering. A high-pitched, shrill scream came out as a layer of specters surrounded Ghost, causing the spiked balls to shoot out in multiple directions, either sticking into a tree or simply passing by. Ghost transformed into his shadow form, and suddenly, with a dark and empty look, he exploded. Thousands of pitch-black tendrils made of void shot out into the treetops, stripping off every single leaf, surprising Hornet. Ghost returned to his vessel form, and using the monarch wings he shot out in a flash against his sister, who covered herself with her trusty needle. Hornet, you surprised me, bro, but we're not done yet, are we? Ghost just sharpened his gaze and destabilized his sister in the air, and then pulled a tendril from his chest, hitting Hornet and causing her to fly to the ground. The Weaver quickly recovered, dodging Ghost, who attacked her, ready to end the battle with one last blow. Hornet, come on, bro! Exclaimed. Ghost looked at her. Hornet, you can't save them all, I mean it, I know, she said, looking down. Ghost silently looked at his sister as he sheathed his stinger. Hornet, ever since you left, ever since you were trapped in the dream realm, I felt sick. I couldn't do anything to get you out of there. Time passed, and I realized I can't save them all, she said, pressing the handle of her needle. Ghost looked silently at Hornet, seeing his sister's discouragement and helplessness. Hornet, I killed my own brothers just to prevent them from fixing a disaster that destroyed my home. I even tried to kill you hundreds of times. I tried everything to fix the problem. I even set out to look for an alternative. But nothing, he said helplessly. Ghost looked at his sister. She has suffered too. She knows what it feels like to have a weight on your shoulders and not be able to carry it. Hornet, and as if that weren't enough, continued, Ghost looked at her as a deathly silence filled the air. Hornet, I tried to take over the throne of Hallownest, something that wasn't mine, she said, looking down. Ghost leaped at Hornet, wielding his stinger, causing her to be surprised and, out of simple instinct, take cover. Suddenly letters of void appeared in front of her. Ghost, don't keep feeling guilty about it. You took the position because there was no one else who would take it, you're right. Maybe I can't save everyone, but I'll try even if it's beyond my reach, and if not, then those I can. We are Hornet brothers. We must be there for each other no matter what. Hornet read all those words quickly but carefully, somehow relieved to read them from her brother. It felt liberating. Hornet, you're right, bro. We're meant for each other, he said, smiling under his mask, but suddenly a sort of red ladybug flew in front of Ghost as Hornet said, Hornet, we're not done yet. The Weaver then proceeded to destabilize her brother by catching him off guard and then jumping backwards away from the area of fire. Boom! A reddish-orange explosion occurred, raising a cloud of dust and smoke in the somewhat destroyed field. Hornet looked at the cloud intently, only to see his brother's stinger emerge from the cloud. Hornet deflected it with difficulty upwards, but the force with which the weapon came made her drop hers, and before she even got close, a tendril emerged from the cloud of dust, catching the stinger in the air and throwing it at her before she could dodge it. She saw a Ghost in front of her, already close to her, who kicked her in the chest, knocking her down, only for the stinger to fall sheathed on the vessel's back. Hornet, hee, good distraction, bro. Ghost just nodded as he stopped subduing her and approached the needle to give it to Hornet, who had already stopped. Ghost threw the weapon and Hornet took it and reholstered it. Hornet, how do we explain this to others? This was the Weaver's question as she looked around at what had once been a forest, now looking more like a war zone generated in Vietnam. Ghost, we'll think of an excuse later. I'm actually sleepy. Hornet nodded. Hornet, we'd better get back. Suddenly they both felt presences behind them, making them turn around. There was a group of green and red mantises alike, which were attracted by the battle of both brothers. Hornet, do you still have energy? Ghost looked at his sister, and then simply nodded, wielding his stinger again. Hours later, the chestnut was waking up while hearing the sound of a hammering, and, someone shut up the neighbor, it's Sunday, she said, covering her ears with her pillow. Grimchild, Annie, today is Tuesday, and by the way, what neighbor? The chestnut opened her eyes, and stop. So where's that hammering coming from? And got out of bed to put on her slipper and socks and leave the basement, and the house, being followed by Grimchild and Kim. As he left, he saw Ghost hammering with some kind of improvised hammer made with a stick and a stone, while Hornet cautiously held some kind of metal plate. "Anne, what are you doing?" Ghost stopped hammering and Hornet looked at Anne. "Hornet, we're making armor." "And armor? What metal exactly?" she said, looking at the strange breastplate. "Grimchild, where did they get that mantis skin?" she asked curiously, and was surprised and a little disgusted to hear that. "And wait, and since when did you get it?" Ghost and Hornet looked at each other, and then looked at Anne before simply proceeding to point at the forest, and could see a small pile of red and green breastplates next to where the two brothers were pointing. "And oh wow," she said somewhat shocked.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.